It's finally the best month of the year. With fright and fun galore, I wanted to kick things off with something I thought would be interesting and fun. Talking about every ghost-type Pokemon and their origins, from those born from humans to the ones that command the dead. Discussing whether each of them really are ghosts or just a hoax. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and how could I ever discuss these wonderful ghost types without being dressed up a little differently in some capacity myself? Now that we've actually traded out our lab coat for something a little bit more sinister, that feels a bit more right, and the lighting is about where I want it to be, why don't we go ahead and start jumping into things. To just briefly explain where I get this information and how this is going to be structured, I get most of my basis from Bulbapedia and the Pokemon database, and then from there I look into additional information. All of my extra sources are in the description below if I do not state them out loud. Now the structure for this will just simply be the Pokemon in order through the Pokédex, with exclusion to their evolutions being brought in a little bit closer for organizational sake, and I will tell you all about them, their origins, what they're based on, or likely based on, and then give my own little opinion. So how about we just jump in with Gastly, who's just sitting right behind me. Now, Gastly was initially thought to just be this ball of darkness that has gas surrounding it, when in reality, it just is the gas. And those gases can expand to envelop and suffocate any foe, even a Copperajah. Now, this gas also has this noxious but sickly sweet smell, and that smell is very reminiscent of decay. Decay in general has been described as having that putrid odor, but also having this faintly sweet smell like that of rotting fruit. Now, with Gastly being made up of gas, it does not like to really be outside on windy days, as the wind can blow away all of the gas and make Gastly disappear. Of course, Gastly is afraid of that actually happening, so as such, they prefer to stay inside of buildings where they don't have to worry about said threats. They can make illusions, phase through objects, and even form hands with that gas of theirs. Though despite all these powers, it is claimed that they're not only just playful, but they like playing pranks on others. Alternatively, what they might do, and I'm not sure how I feel about this concerning they like to play pranks, they will pass on messages from the great beyond to people here from our departed loved ones. There's also some belief that their body is 95% gas, 5% souls from everybody that it hunted, because of course, how could you not have some sort of darker part to this Pokemon? Now, it is likely based off of the Hitodaba or Onibi, Japanese spirits similar to a will-o'-the-wisp, and of course, they have some basis in poisonous gases in general. It being a poison type and extremely lightweight can also be related to the Fuyure, my goodness, floating spirits that are able to spread diseases. We then get to move on to Haunter, which now it has these pointed, gassy teeth and these fully formed clawed hands, and it now keeps around. Even a tail of sorts kind of in the back end there. Now, it hides in dark places such as caves because it's afraid of light. Unknown really why, maybe it just disappears in the light, maybe because it is transitioning to live in the shadows, which would make perfect sense for what we talk about after Haunter. Now, if a human or Pokemon comes near, it will lick the victim with its gassy tongue, which feels so wrong to say out loud. How can your tongue be gassy? Don't answer that. Now, when they do this, they will end up taking the victim's life force. This, in turn, causes the victim to convulse and shake, basically, until they die. It can float through walls, it can control these hands from incredibly far away, and even just reach right into that body of yours and just rip out your spirit. It reminds me of, there's a whole, like, Danny Phantom, where I've seen, like, Danny Phantom, Deadpool, and Spider-Man together for some reason. And Spider-Man's like, why do I always feel like I'm in danger right now? Every time you are near, why do I feel like I'm in danger? And Danny Phantom goes, I could literally kill you any second that I want, as he just reaches inside of Spider-Man's chest with his hand towards his heart. And I'm just like, Jesus. So that's what I always end up thinking about when I think of like that exact motion of just pulling a spirit from the body. Either that or Scooby-Doo movie, the one of the island. You know what I'm talking about. Now, despite its predatory nature and how scary this Pokemon might seem, it is known to entertain and prank people, just as Gastly has started developing that once when its trainer dies, it is very loyal to that deceased trainer, and it is very reminiscent of the yokai Akaguchi, which is a creature with a wide mouth and a long tongue whose body is covered by dark clouds, making only its head and clawed hands visible. It can also be like Dyla, which is a Philippine spirit that licked the life energy of sick people until they died. Or it could also be related to any other variants of the Akaname. It's actually kind of fitting for the Akaguchi, because the alternate name for Akaguchi is the Red Tongue. So that's a fun little tidbit right there. Before we get into not only what is my favorite ghost type, but also my favorite Pokemon of all time, Gengar. Now it is fully formed with its goofy little body. It can hide perfectly in the shadow of any object. And it even acts like some sort of heat sink, cooling its surroundings around it by 10 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 degrees Celsius, absorbing all of the warmth in the area, which is very much like a poltergeist or a ghost in general, honestly. It can fly, it can possess people in Pokemon, it can create illusions, it can extend its tongue by several meters. I still need to buy myself at some point that, like, Gengar plush that has the tongue roll out so you can sleep on it. And it's just the funniest thing, because it has the businessman sleeping with his head in it. And I think they used to go for like $200. Now they're down to 60 after all these years, which is beautiful. But Nightshade used to be its signature move until, you know, everything else. And all the other Pokemon got to start using it. And it's very mischievous, leaning more on malicious than its previous forms. But it does still love practical jokes and still casting curses. So it's like on one end you have the whole, oh, it's just a prank, bro. And on the other hand, you have, I curse you and your entire family lineage for thousands of years to come. You will never know wet soil. You will never have pasta where the sauce sticks to the noodles. You will never have a cold pillow ever again. Now, it does love seeing people get scared, but it is rarely found in the wild. Though just like Haunter, it could be because it prefers to stay in dark places where shadows form, especially urban areas within dark alleys at night. It is stated that if you feel a sudden chill, it's already too late, and you already have a curse placed upon you. You are being haunted by a Gengar, and you may as well give up. It will even plan its next victim, as it will sleep in the shadows of those it plans to curse. Which again, doesn't help with the whole idea of you not seeing it or it being a rare Pokemon. Now, in my humble opinion, it was such a good Pokemon, being a fan favorite consistently over the years, so much so that it got not one, but 2 special forms. It's Mega and Gigantamax, which I recently learned is Gigantamax. I never really fully realized. Gigantamax rolls off the tongue easier, so bear with me and I apologize. Also, both of these forms give justice to its shiny form, blessed be. I don't know what they were thinking. Haunter had such a good shiny form with the blue outline and everything. It was phenomenal. And then that kind of got tweaked down a little bit. And then you get Gengar, and Gengar doesn't have a good one either. Not anymore. It's just a slightly shade of darker or paler or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Have fun telling the difference. All I know is that these 2 forms do it justice. In its Mega form, that third eye in the forehead opens right on up, allowing it to see into other dimensions. It can even access these dimensions freely and has a vicious nature. It no longer sees any interest in any opponents unless it sees them as its prey. And now, because of Mega Evolution, its understanding of relationships that it has are completely warped, making it desire cursing the life of anyone or anything in its path, even its own trainer, which is horribly ironic considering the whole idea of Mega Stones and Mega Evolution is that you're supposed to have an incredibly strong bond with your Pokemon in order to even use it. And you're telling me I made this Pokemon my best friend. I made you my best friend. And you decide that you're going to kill me. You're going to curse me. I'm going to die. That's ironic right there. And honestly, all it has to do now is wait in a different dimension, watching you until it's ready to strike, as he could just, again, see through different dimensions and just go through them. Meanwhile, in Galar, with its Gigantamax, its mouth is believed to connect directly to the afterlife. The voices of your loved ones calling out to you in order to entice you to enter. Grandma's calling for you to come and get those snickerdoodles. And you're gonna run full bore into that Gengar mouth. Now, all of this is just done so that way it could steal your life as part of its trap. Because people believe that the afterlife is not actually through the mouth of Gengar, who would have guessed, but instead just where you get devoured. Now, it's not only my favorite Pokemon, he's also Ken Sugimori's favorite Pokemon, because he says that Gengar is the easiest to draw. And as I am getting better and better at drawing, I have to actually agree. You draw a circle, you draw two ovals, and then you put a couple of spikes and you're probably done. Just as a super basic shape, you color it purple and people are gonna know that's Gengar, you know? It might also, though, if we talk about its inspirations, be inspired by the big old grinning smile Cheshire Cat, Shadow People, the Fiore, as we've previously mentioned, and even Oni, moreover so in its Mega form due to just like the eye and facial structure, and Gengar's name is derived from Doppelganger, you know, a double, a replica of sorts, that we kind of see doppelgangers in a couple of different pieces of media, and as far as I grew up, doppelgangers were always evil, like always evil, and shadowy. You get them in a lot of games, like a lot of JRPGs actually, now I think about it, where it's like, you have to fight the greatest enemy, yourself. Even Scott Pilgrim did it with Nega Scott. So, opinions on this line, I already said it. Gengar is my favorite. This line in general is one of my favorites overall. Gastly is fantastic. I do believe that it's less of a ghost and more of gas that has been given life. Whereas as it develops, I feel as though maybe it does become more of an actual ghost. Ghost types kind of feel like, and as we go along, you'll find this out more and more, and we'll talk about this more. Ghost types in general feel like it's more about their abilities and less about where they came from. Like, yes, these Pokemon derive originally from a rotting corpse, potentially, which is terrifying. But otherwise, they have just all the normal ghost stuff, and what they're based off of being ghosts like yokai or demons or whatever else. And again, we're going to talk about that more as we continue down the line. Haunter, I remember having a Haunter for so many years, and for Haunter, I remember having a Haunter when I was younger, hoping and praying that I could evolve it into Gengar, when in reality, you can't do it unless you could trade with somebody else. So I just had this level 70 Haunter by the Cerulean Gym second half of the game in Pokemon Gold. And then finally, Gengar. I love everything about Gengar. He is my goofy boy. I've made shorts on him. I have 2 plushes of him. He's my goofy boy. What else could I say? I love him to death. I can't love a ghost Pokemon to death. That brings out another question I might have to answer in the future. Can ghost Pokemon die? And the answer is technically yes. I've always just, I don't know. It's hard to say anything else about a Pokemon that I've loved so much. 1, because of his design. 2, because of how he acts. And just wanting to have your favorite Pokemon brought to real life. is kind of polarizing with Gengar, because on one hand, I would love to have them, but on the other hand, if we base it off of all this information, my own Pokemon will murder me. There is no doubt about it. But instead of delving onto that, or staying on this for longer, me using the correct word, how about we move into Alolan Marowak. Alolan Marowak, having been exposed to many natural enemies, Cubone adapted to the external pressure in a way that exceeds any other Pokemon, in my personal opinion. Grass types everywhere, it evolves into a ghost fire type, and now bonds closer with its friends, which has allowed it to develop its sixth sense. It is now sturdier, even the bone club it uses being longer and more like a fire staff or fire knife, which are used by Samoans in traditional dances. It mourns its friends when they do pass away, burying them, then dancing in the morning as a form of goodbye ritual. One might think it being in a land surrounded by water would put others at ease from the fear of its flames, but here's the problem with that. It has developed its life and strategy, its powers, to counteract water in general. Because not only do these flames restlessly pursue its victim, these flames also cannot be extinguished by water. They also don't just cause external physical pain, they also cause mental pain. If you think that a brain freeze is bad, imagine what a brain burn would be like. Now, the concept and belief of mana, a spiritual essence that exists in all objects or people, may have inspired the creation of this Pokemon. And this idea, or the idea of mana, also allows people to imbue their quote-unquote spirit into other people and objects for protection or for vengeance. This is shown in so many different forms of media that I can't even keep count anymore, and it's hard to tell if it's going to be mana or chakra or spirit energy, whether it's whatever it might be. The passing on of power from one to another through a non-physical, non-tangible medium of sorts. Now, we could also add in that the Night Marchers of Hawaiian myth could have been additional inspiration for this, which I will actually talk about later in a more apt Pokemon. Overall, with Alolan Marowak, I think I showed my hand a little bit, which was the fact that I love Alolan Marowak. It was the Pokemon that people had wanted for years. People have wanted a Ghost Marowak since Lavender Tower, since the Pokemon Tower, whatever you want to call it, right? It was a Pokemon that we got to see as a ghost, level 30, fight it, and know that it wanted to protect its children. And yet, it was a Pokemon that we could not catch. We could only fight it after we could see it with the Sylph Scope. One of the first examples of a true ghost. But now we have this ghost type, fire ghost type, Alolan Marowak, which, once again, isn't really a ghost. It just has the power of spiritual essence that it can control. So, in my personal opinion, and based off of the information before us, I would say Alolan Marowak is not an actual ghost, but simply has ghost-like powers. Doesn't make it any less cool, though. Hisuian Typhlosion, this lackadaisical Pokemon, is believed to have been influenced by the energy emanating from Mount Coronet. With graceful and refined movements, at least it thinks so, we look at it and see a stoner, this gentle pacifist of a Pokemon often stares into space. But it's believed that they are actually not just staring off, but rather watching the flow of life energy for wayward spirits or souls to eat. Though, despite this, they don't actually eat the souls. They catch and guide them to the afterlife like a Psychopomp, which a Psychopomp is an individual, kind of like the Grim Reaper for the most part, really. Grim Reaper has a couple of different things going on in addition to what a normal Psychopomp might do, but Psychopomps are guides in the afterlife, in addition to, they do a couple of different things. But when angered, it will unleash 108 flames exactly, to incinerate opponents until not even ash remains. Each of those flames taking on the appearance of ferocious beasts, which is phenomenal. That's really cool. I need to not put my opinion right here. It's hard not to be excited about certain parts as we go along. Now, it has designs reminiscent of Magatama beads and the number 108, which is reminiscent of the Buddhist numerology and coincides with the number of beads when those, like, I don't want to call them necklaces, but I'm going to say they're necklaces. They are Magatama beads. That is what they are supposed to be called. But you see them with traditional monks, and whether it's like on their hands or around their neck. Now, I firmly believe that Hisuian Typhlosion not only inspired the creation of those beads within the world of Pokemon, and helped create other psychics within the Pokemon world, but also may have helped create at least one Spiritomb. But we'll save that part for later. Just do me one favor and remember the number 108, because that's going to come in handy when we talk about Spiritomb later. Otherwise, the inspirations leading into the creation of Hisuian Typhlosion may have likely drawn from Typhon, who is said to be buried under the volcano Mount Etna after his defeat. Typhon, Typhlosion, the volcano Pokemon, kind of lines up decently well. Now, Typhon even had a mate named Ekdina, oh goodness, or Ulipotifla. I am not perfect with my word verbiage, saying pronunciation linguistics, but Ulipotifla, why did I say it again? Which is a hypothetical mammalian order which contains shrews and hedgehogs, which Cyndaquil is based off of an echidna after all, and kind of looks a little bit like a shrew or a hedgehog, depending on where it is down the line. Of course, when you get into Typhlosion itself, it gets elongated and starts looking like other animals, but at least we have that basis. Eat your heart out, Knuckles. This bad boy is my favorite Techaglossidae. When I first saw Hisuian Typhlosion, I fell in love with it. I already loved Typhlosion, Pokemon Heart Gold, Pokemon Crystal was my first Pokemon game, and Heart Gold is my most replayed Pokemon game of all time. I love it. It's so much fun. Even if I don't play the second half, there's just so much good in it. And Chikorita was my first starter, but I did use Cyndaquil quite often as well. With that, I got to see a lot of Typhlosion and its power, and I just always thought it was incredibly cool. So when Typhlosion got a variant in Hisuian form, I looked at it and it looked so chill and happy. And the fact that it now has the ghost typing in it, my second favorite, like, typing in general, that's it. It was a shoo-in to be my, like, my baby, my child, I had to put you on the team Pokemon. And then, of course, once again, it's not an actual ghost. It has ghost-like powers. It can take spirits and help them move on from this mortal coil, no longer wandering, and reach true peace. They have spiritual powers, but it is not a ghost. How about we talk about one that I can't even deny at all is a ghost? Misdreavus. This cute little ghost lives in caves and is a fan of the night as a nocturnal Pokemon and enjoys mischievous tricks, hence the name, inspiration, Misdreavus, mischievous. Even yanking or biting at people's hair, sneaking up on them and giving them a jump scare, and more. Very much like a child would, or even a banshee comes in and screams, or a mare, another type of ghost. It even uses its own hair that it has on its head, which is really strange because it kind of melds into itself, so it makes it feel like it should be made out of hair. But it uses that hair to grasp at objects and Pokemon, similar to the yokai floating heads that are called Nukekubi. Though in the side games, if it is defeated, it actually only leaves the beads behind, implying that it actually retreats into the beads if weakened. But in order to gain strength, and energy in general. It absorbs the fearful feelings of its foes and turns that into nutrition for itself. I don't know what kind of mitochondria this Pokemon has inside of it, but it is turning emotions into nutrition. Maybe it'll help me figure out what the heck was going on with Drowsy. And if somehow you're watching this and haven't watched the video on the Kanto ecology, go watch that after this. That has, it's one of my favorites. But back to the main matter at hand, though despite its fearful presence that it likes to convey, it may draw some design inspirations from the very cute Teru Teru Bozu, which are these little small traditional handmade dolls that are hung outside of doors and hung outside of windows in Japan in order to try and bring about sunny weather. And just like Hisuian Typhlosion, the orbs around its neck are very reminiscent of the Japamala orbs, which are used to make up the beads. Which is weird to say out loud. When I think of beads, I think of just the one, not the full necklace as being described as that, but I guess I should start calling it beads to be more appropriate. Realize I've never shown it on camera before, but I've always mentioned how I drink tea while doing these recordings, so that way I can ensure my throat stays in good quality. No, I'm not sponsored by any tea companies. That would be a dream, actually. I would love that, because I love me some tea and coffee, which I have a little, but first, coffee Snorlax mug. It was a gift, and I love it, and I still use it all the time because it's perfect for when I'm doing Pokemon videos. Now I'm gonna hold it for the rest of this shot, as we're gonna talk about Mismagius next, which, yes, of course, that puts it out of the Pokédex order, but I'd rather keep our evolutions close by each other. With Mismagius, not only does it look like a witch, but it also chants like a witch. And if you look at its moveset, what it can learn, it learns very, very few moves naturally. Instead, you need to use TMs to teach it its moves, which it can learn an incredibly wide array of TMs. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm fairly sure it can learn more TMs than most other Pokemon. Of course, excluding your mythical and legendaries. I'm not even going to consider them a part of that comparison, which is very much like a witch studying incantation. Now, there's tons of rumors about this Pokemon, and it is said to show up without warning and cause havoc on everyone. The incantations it uses can either cause happiness or misery. And despite that risk, people decide that they're gonna go ahead and try to capture this thing, all to have it not just influence regular, but like full on make people fall in love with them. That is against the genie rule in Aladdin. Robin Williams would be disappointed in you. Genie would be disappointed in you. Now, customs do also exist where if it does appear, you are supposed to invite it into your home in order to avoid any sort of damage or misfortune that it might otherwise cast upon you and your home by not doing so. Now, it might also try and get you to fall asleep, making you have strange dreams while you still think you are awake. Like, we're talking some Inception level stuff, which would be amazing. Give me Inception, but make it a Mismagius. The good news is, if the Mismagius is knocked out, then you also wake up. Going back to the Inception idea, how about if it's going to be Inception with a Mismagius, whatever you want to say, Mismagius, instead of it getting knocked out at the end of the movie, like the top keeps like spinning and you don't know if it falls or not, how about you have the Mismagius fall asleep itself? It's not necessarily knocked out, it has a status condition, it is asleep. Who knows what the ultimate solution or what the end result will be. And I think that's a fun little thing to do. It's often found roaming around lakes or mountainsides at night, and its colors may represent the witch-like yokai known as Nazubaba, as an addition to all of Misdreavus's inspirations that we have talked about previously. Its Japanese name is Mumaragi, which may be a combination of the words Muma, that can mean either nightmare or demon in a dream, and Magi or Magi, meaning to bewitch, which also means mage or magic. I really need to touch back up on my Japanese. I want to go to Japan at some point, and I don't want to be an absolute bumbling oaf. Opinions on Mismagius? Love it. Great Pokemon. I like the design. I think Misdreavus is pretty cute all in all. I always get a little excited just because, like, I never used them on a team before, and I'm like, oh, you're adorable. Now perish. Like, get away from me. I don't care otherwise. Mismagius, though, really cool, mainly because of the witch hat that it has, and it does have a nice Pokemon cry that feels very fitting for it. And I guess you could say that about a lot of Pokemon, but it's one that kind of sticks in my head with the way that it goes up and down, like a haunted whale upon the wind. So, when we look at these two, it is most definitely, or they are most definitely, ghosts. I mean, we even talked about the fact that they're very much like Banshees, and I played my fair share of Phasmophobia, so I got to re-experience a lot of these ghosts and get reintroduced to so many of them. Maybe I'll play some Phasmophobia this October. We'll see. We'll see. But how about we move on with the next Pokemon? Galarian Corsola. Time to get depressed about real life due to all the overall unclean water issues and global warming issues making the temperature of our seas rise. Which Galar is all about exploring some Pokemon that have had a harsh environment to live in due to a decaying environment. At least in terms of quality, not actual, like, everything's rotting, decaying. Now, this overall, due to global warming, has caused coral bleaching, which is basically where the coral loses its color and life and just becomes perfectly white, which is made very apparent as Corsola loses all those vibrant colors and even just loses that wonderful life shine in its eyes, like when you became an adult. Now, it is a ghost type. Its branches are semi-transparent, and while those branches can't cause injury or pain, they will still take root inside of you and drain the life force of you and others that end up in contact with it in this way, immobilizing the victim that it hits with this until Corsola lets them go. They're also commonly found in the remains of prehistoric seas, which they are mistaken for ordinary rocks. And of course, please do not kick them or you will get cursed. Now, eventually, that shell of theirs breaks, because it's not really the shell, it's what's inside that matters. And the body becomes incorporeal, and its spirit energy pours out as it becomes Corsola. The ectoplasmic body surrounding the main face of its physical self comes from its destroyed former shell of itself, extending and expanding from it as a base. It displays a screaming face with a sad or pained expression and can split apart the branches when it attacks. If you touch the ectoplasm, you will turn to stone, kind of like a Gorgon. Medusa, for example, you know, she looks at you, you turn to stone. You touch this thing, it touches you, you turn to stone. But on the bright side, they do have some level of joy in their lives once again, as they are seen wobbling back and forth while wandering around, potentially since they actually just enjoy being so lightweight now. I think it'd be really funny to just see them bouncing back and forth like that, and it has like the Mr. Krabs, you know? Now, they gather under a full moon and extend their branches to the sky, though it is rather unknown why this is the case. There is some speculation that this is their way of either communicating with other Corsola or releasing spirit energy that they absorb. They are based on Gorgonian corals, which Corsola could just be a visual pun of. And larvaceans do shed their mucus housing often like Corsola does. In addition to speculation that exists that coral might actually have a spawning relationship with phases of the moon. Also, because I realized I didn't actually explain it, larvaceans or appendicularians, class Appendicularia, are solitary free-swimming tunicates found throughout the world's oceans. While larvaceans are filter feeders like most other tunicates, they keep their tadpole-like shape as adults, with a notochord running through the tail. Galarian Corsola and Corsola I love. As somebody who was pursuing an environmental degree and had to learn an incredible number of depressing facts and information about our world, there's just something beautiful about having to internalize these horrible, horrible things, realizing I can't save everything, but I can choose to save this. I could choose to save that, even if it's only for 10 more years. I don't know. It felt right. It felt natural. It felt tied in really nicely in a way that I appreciate. And as such, it is one of my favorite regional forms. Also, once again, this one is very hard for me to argue that it isn't a ghost when it very much is. It is made up of ectoplasm. It comes from the husk and shell of its former self. It is a ghost through and through. It is literally coming out of its dead body that is just used as a sort of miniature home or shell or base, almost like a genie in the lamp type situation. It's pretty sick, honestly. Now, how about we talk about Shedinja, the Wonder Guard Master itself. This shed cicada shell has no internal organs and can even just let itself into an empty Pokeball after it evolves from Nincada. Though I feel incredibly bad, and just it must have been absolutely awful for the person who just decided that I'm gonna go and confirm whether or not this thing has organs on the inside, looks inside and sees horrors beyond our imagination, because looking inside of the empty shell through its back will cause your spirit to be stolen. It doesn't say anything about Shedinja not giving it back, but that doesn't guarantee anything. Now, it has a strong defense, being incredibly tough with its shell, but it can't really move, it doesn't breathe, and as such, it just kind of floats on with its tattered wings as it lives in tropical and temperate forests. Now, this can all relate not only, obviously, directly to the shed husk of the cicada, but also, less obviously, to Utusemi, which is the ninjutsu technique where a dummy or replica is created to evade and escape threats. Basically making Shedinja that dummy that you would see in, like, I don't know, Naruto did it a ton. That's the one that most people probably know about. Now, it can also be related to Guardian Angels, as it does have a halo above its head, and because it has the Wonder Guard ability. Those two together really come together, and I think it's kind of fitting if you take into the idea of the do not be afraid that is said when angels come down and you see them, because, I mean, in this case, you should probably be afraid, but ultimately, it's supposed to guard you, it's supposed to be protective, at least in its abilities, and then just, you know, just don't peep the horrors, don't look at its back, which, that actually reminds me, there is a yokai, and I just now remember it, there is a yokai that you basically don't want to look at its back, or you get cursed, or something along those lines, and I've seen that, I believe I've seen that in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Part 4, I have seen that in Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1, there's a couple of different places where that kind of appears, and I think that does have some level of basis with Shedinja here. Shedinja never really made much of an impact on me over the years. I know that, like, it's a solid mon, it has some cool stuff going for it, it can only be damaged by what is super effective against it, it has 1 point of HP, but at the same time, I look at this Pokemon and I go, drop a bit of poison on it. Just let it run out of moves. It's not horribly, terrifyingly, incredibly strong. Even if you look at stuff like a Nuzlocke, it's just a matter of have a little poison powder on hand. Have a little poison powder on hand. It's totally not illegal. I mean, it's from a Pokemon, right? Right? Oh, gosh, that sounds like a horrible thing to have to deal with in the Pokemon world. Or even looking at, I don't know, there's just so many different things. But ultimately, Shedinja has a cool design. I love the halo above its head. That is not something I have seen in any other Pokemon as I'm going through the Rolodex in my head. And otherwise, I don't know, it's just solid. Gen 3 didn't have too much of an impact on me. Probably because I played the ROM hacks too many times and it kind of fell by the wayside for the most part. But I'm learning to love it again. Shedinja, I would argue it could be a ghost. It could not be a ghost. I'm willing to go either way on this one. I would dare say I am leaning more on it being a ghost because it is just a husk. There are no organs or anything else involved with this Pokemon. It is literally like a possessed husk, which that drives a lot of questions as to the spirit of Pokemon. What is a Pokemon's spirit? That's going to get discussed at some point. Probably not in this video, but at some point in the future. How about we move on to another Gen 3 Mon as we talk about Sableye. This little humanoid, armed with sharp teeth and sharp claws, digs through the soil for delicious little gems to eat. Link's nightmare, or best friend, honestly. Now, these gems have caused parts of its body to actually mutate just because of how many gems it keeps eating. You are what you eat, they say, so are cannibals the most humans of us all? I don't know. So in terms of Sableye, because it is what it eats, its body parts have started to turn into rocks or gems themselves, resulting in different patterns across its body. They fight with Gabite over Carbink as prey, and rumor has it that they can steal a person's soul if they look it in the eyes. Because, of course, you can't just have a ghost Pokemon that doesn't steal your soul or try to kill you in some capacity. At least early on. Now, it is nocturnal, rarely seen, and lives in the darkness of caves. It sleeps with gemstones and dreams of eating these gemstones. Everything about this Pokemon revolves around gemstones. Now, it decides to Mega Evolve. And instead of internalizing all this power, it said, nah, give it to my gem. And that gem ended up being the one on its chest, which then starts to grow in size and rip from its body. It flat out says that in the information on Sableye, that this gem rips itself out, significantly increases in size, and now there's just this hole in Sableye's chest. But Sableye doesn't care. Sableye has a giant gem that is just smiling and super happy about. And this gem is said to be so hard that no attack can leave a scratch on it. As such, Sableye is sitting here peeking around it like some sort of forest raccoon to try and make sure that it's using this shield of a gem to protect itself. Then, whenever you attack, you get the recoil because you can't even scratch it, so you're going to get some nasty recoil, some pain, and you're going to be left open. Sableye takes advantage of that opportunity and attacks you. The only downside to Sableye using this gem is that it's so heavy. Because of its weight, Sableye is using most of its energy to just kind of keep this gem up, and as such, is left with an opening in its back, allowing you to take advantage of that situation and strike it from behind in order to defeat Sableye. Sableye in general, he reminds me of Stitch. I don't know, I love Stitch. Stitch is my favorite. Lilo and Stitch is my favorite Disney movie of all time, but Sableye has always been a goofy little gremlin that I do appreciate. I know it can have other, inspirations when we look at things like the Carbuncle, which the Carbuncle has a lot of different forms. Being the only consistency is that it usually has a gem on its head, but there are so many different forms, and it comes from South America in terms of its origin, living as carbuncles do within deep mines or caves or so on and so forth, and being very rare. And of course, like I said, it's very gremlin-like. It is very greedy. So Sableye, it's a hard one. It is a ghost dark type that just kind of eats gems. It's very underhanded in terms of the fact that it just wants to keep stealing these gems and eating them. I'm not sure. This might be another one where I'm willing to go either way on if it's a ghost or not. Because even its powers, the one power it really has is the fact that it can steal. It is rumored that it could steal souls if you look into its eyes. So I'm not sure. I'm gonna say that it's not a ghost and that it's just somehow the living personification. Oh wait, what if it's a grave robber or thief that got turned into a ghost? That's possible. That's possible, but none of that's ever said anywhere. So Big toss-up. How about we move on, though, to Shuppet. So I should have put a note in the video already, but if you notice, the visual quality has changed between, like, all the other stuff to this point. It's because OBS decided it was a great idea to not stop recording, so I had to force close it. So I don't think it fully encoded, which means there might be a drop in visual quality, hopefully not audio quality, and I can try to at least fix the audio quality. We'll see. Future Acrylic, we'll see. The other point that her current Acrylic is dealing with is now I put the mask on and now it's speaking to me. I don't mean that in the, oh, I'm trying to be horror-esque. No, it is I can hear more sounds because of the ambient sounds in the room that exist that you can't hear, but they are echoing inside of this and speaking into my ear. This is fantastic. I am slowly actually going insane, as opposed to all the other times where it was at least an act. But let's talk about Banette like I'm supposed to. No, not Banette. Shuppet. I'm supposed to talk about Shuppet. Shuppet is almost literally an actual Terraterabozu in terms of its, like, design, but otherwise it has a horn atop of its head, which is where you'd expect the little loop to be, that it uses to absorb the negative emotions of people, and that in turn feeds Shuppet. The emotion it feeds on include anger, jealousy, resentment, and malice. So some people are actually very grateful for its presence, because what this does is when it feeds on these emotions, it actually full-on feeds from them and takes them from you. This in turn actually ends up making Shuppet stronger. It is nocturnal and appears in swarms beneath the eaves of houses with negative people that are inside. There is a proverb that says, "Shun the house where Shuppet gather in the growing dusk." In other words, if a bunch of Shuppet are constantly going to this one house, that probably means there's a lot of bad stuff going on there. There's a lot of negativity in that house. Don't go there. Now, it is also commonly found in cities and other urban settings, and will retreat to its nest, which is a really weird thing to say, but thanks Pokemon, when the sun rises. If it sleeps near a sleeping person, it will eat up their dark feelings and cause the person to wake up in the morning with their mood improved. That sounds phenomenal. I would love, absolutely adore a Shuppet, because I'm a fairly positive person all in all. I am actually what I consider a cheerful nihilist. I'm somebody who's like, oh, when we, like, everything we do in the end will all get turned into space dust. And I take comfort in that. I don't take that in a negative aspect. I mean that in the, well, if I mess up right here, right now, nobody's eventually nobody's gonna remember my screw up. So I get to just go and do what I want. And I've had a lot of people who are like, well, that sounds like you would become a very bad person. I go, no, it means that I should be less afraid about doing what I want to do and be who I want to be and live the life that I think I deserve, while also trying to help others. I don't know. It's a weird twist on it all, but there you go. You know I'm a cheerful nihilist now. Now, let's move on to Shuppet's evolution, Banette. A doll possessed by pure hatred after being abandoned, and now it comes to life to seek out the one that left it behind. It keeps its life force safely within its body by the means of its zipped up mouth. If unzipped, it would lose this energy. Now, it lays curses on others by using its own body as a voodoo doll and sticking pins in it. Just, I just imagine just it's, or even just, not even that. Realistically speaking, Banette would probably just look at the person dead in the eye and just slowly bring the pin over to it and just right across. We could have some amazing Pokemon horror if the company would ever make it. But I mean, yeah, I guess we've seen some stuff in the anime, and seen people turn into dolls, people be controlled, like end of the world type stuff happening, parallel dimensions and universes and all this stuff. But like, if you wanted some really, really twisted horror, a living voodoo doll that could just selectively choose people, harm, like, use its body to harm others, and then spends the night stitching itself back up, that is terrifying, and I think that's sick. Banette does live in garbage dumps and dark alleys, though despite the evil within it, treating it with enough care and love will actually end up satisfying its grudge, and it will turn back into a stuffed toy. It is said that it laughs happily while it is asleep, as those dreams are reminding it of a time where it was loved and cared for, which is, wow, that's depressing. Thank you, Pokemon. I believe Pokemon Sleep specifically. Now, we get into its Mega Evolution, and it gains more zippers than a freaking Kingdom Hearts character, as now it does leave the arms and legs unzipped, revealing just this cursed body underneath what it claims to be purple. I think it's more pink to me, but whatever. It's purple claws and legs peeking out from underneath, and just like Gengar, it's so vindictive now that it can't help but just curse even its trainer. Opinions on this line, they're a grudge brought to life. I guess you can argue they are ghosts, but when you are instilling negativity into something to bring it up or bring it life, that is arguably something else, not necessarily a ghost. Yes, there are poltergeists that possess things, but these aren't possessions. Shuppet is born from negativity, so maybe like you could see it as some sort of wraith or otherwise. But when you get into Banette, it is just, again, it says it's possessed by pure hatred. It's pure hatred, not another spirit. So do with that one as you will. I will actually lean more towards calling them ghosts, despite my argument and my devil's advocate playing that I just did here. And I think they're cool. They're great. Shuppet, another one that's a little cute ultimately. And Banette, I would actually love a Banette doll. More of a Mega Banette doll would be really freaking cool to have right next to like the regular Pokédoll, like the green one substitute, because I don't know, it feels right. Also, that was used in one of the anime episodes. I only know that because I was looking up clips, because Banette was the first, for some reason, Banette was the first Pokemon that I actually did rating your favorite Pokemon with, which is not something I do anymore, but it kicked off me wanting to learn a ton about Pokemon and learn a ton about our world through it, so it holds a very special place in my heart. Up next, we have the Duskull line. This Pokemon and its evolutions are all related to the Grim Reaper in some capacity. It can become invisible to sneak up on prey and even go through walls. It is nocturnal, as many of our ghosts are, but I'm gonna keep repeating it because not all of them are, and lives in thick forests. Now, once it chooses a target, it will doggedly pursue the victim until the break of dawn. I don't know anybody personally that can outrun a ghost that could go through walls for a rough 12 hours almost. Well, we'll say 8 if you want to be nice about it, and it's not winter. I don't know. But it has also been described as enjoying the crying of children, and is said to even spirit them away if they are disobedient. But this is mainly to make children behave in general. Duskull's diet consists of the vital energy of children, and all victims tend to suffer an intense chill after being drained of their life force. Which, life force is something that needs to be questioned a little bit here and there, in my opinion, because, like, life force is just feels like a very strong generalization. Is that taking years off of your life in general? Do you have a certain amount of life force within your body currently that will then get depleted or removed and has to get replenished? How does that work? There's just so many questions regarding that. I'm going to make the general assumption that, let's say, you were supposed to live to the age of 80, I don't know, and these things decide to take your life force. By doing so, you are now only going to live to the age of 75 and are not going to die instantly. Unless the Pokemon decides that it's going to take everything here and now. I don't know. Because there's also situations where maybe it could just take everything now. See, I'm getting into the logistics of it and I'm going to lose my mind. Either way, there are inspirations not just from the Grim Reaper, but also involving the Boogeyman and its Japanese equivalent, the Namahage. Now, the Namahage are demon-like beings portrayed by men wearing hefty Oni or ogre masks and traditional straw capes, Mino, during a New Year's ritual. And its shape, Duskull's overall shape, is similar to a Hitodama, the Japanese representation of a human soul. As it evolves into Dusclops, it kind of gains more of a taste for everything. With a hollow body wrapped in bandages, it can absorb anything much like a black hole. It's like a teenager, you're a growing boy or girl, you need your meat. Now it pulls these things that it decides to absorb through the bandages between them and just wrapping it up, like a mummy almost. Now it is rumored that the red eye it has is actually the true form of Dusclops, and it waves its hands to hypnotize opponents, then force them to do as it desires. Now, it will prey on drifting will-o'-the-wisps, sucking them into its body, which will-o'-the-wisps are just like spirits. I always imagine them just as like a little ball with a little bit of woo-woo-woo, like wispiness coming off of them. And it lives, as Duskull did, in thick forests and is generally active at nighttime. Finally, we get into Dusk Noir, and I have covered Dusk Noir before in my covering of 10 Pokemon and their myths, but I'll actually talk about Dusk Noir here, as the Grim Reaper Pokemon itself evolved from Dusclops using a Reaper cloth. It receives signals from the spirit world through the use of the antenna on its head. It usually only appears to those who are dead and bring their souls to the afterlife, and because of that, people have grown to fear it. Again, very much like the Grim Reaper, where it is typically not meant to be a harmful figure, but it is the personification of death, and as such, people fear it being taken away from their loved ones. Now, there is some extra fear that can be applied, because sometimes Dusk Noir does make a mistake and take the wrong person before their time, though it often protects people from being taken to the spirit world before they should be going there. It is unknown if Dusk Noir actually has a will of its own, because it receives these signals to its head and it tells it what to do. So there is the chance that Dusk Noir doesn't truly have a will of its own and is said to actually just be a sort of vehicle for the greater beings that exist in the Pokemon world. And what adds to that is that while it is believed that they take people to the afterlife or Pokemon or whatever it might be, it's kind of unknown where they actually travel to. Especially as, like, it gets a little weird because you get put into its stomach, it eats you, and then it can release you, but where is it gonna release you? Is it truly taking you across the River Styx? You know what I mean? Actually, wait. Do you want to go across the River Styx? I always forget if going across River Styx is just specifically bad because it leads into Hades, or hell in general, or you cross the River Styx and can go one of two ways. I actually always forget that. Now, Dusk Noir only consumes the spiritual essence of individuals, leaving the remains of living beings completely untouched. It does have a number of inspirations from the mountain-dwelling Yamawaru, which really is just for comparison reasons, just a Cyclops. And then you also have the paper lantern-like Chochinobake, which, again, more of a Cyclops, and you can argue that, we have the Jack-o'-lantern body, and that the top of Dusk Noir here could be more paper-like, so I can understand that. And again, goes back to more of it being Cyclops, but I kind of wanted to look into the Chochinobake a little bit more. So I kind of just used yokai.com, which, funny enough, just has a bunch of yokai nice and simple and right there for me in their stories. And it states, for its appearance, when a paper lantern or a Chochin reaches an advanced age, it may transform into a Chochinobake. The paper of the lantern splits along one of its wooden ribs, forming a gaping mouth with a wild, lolling tongue. We don't have a tongue with this bad boy. One or two eyes pop out from the upper half of the lantern, and its arms or legs may even sprout from body as well, although this is rare. And of course, the last bit of inspiration would be electronic voice phenomena. This is something that occurs when you have, I guess when you're just hearing voices from the radio. You have a radio and it has the static and you're just hearing a random voice or two. There's a lot of different methods when it comes to ghost hunting where people will just switch between the channels, and if a sentence is created, or you have the, what is it, like, I was about to say the EMF, but that's not the case. There are a number of different methods to try and get the voice of individuals to come out through electronics, even on pure static channels. This can be explained in a number of different ways. Ghosts, do I believe them? I mean, technically, yes. We're not going to get into that right now. Maybe I'll talk about that later. Got to keep you here after all. Let's talk about how I feel about the Duskull line in general. Because the Duskull line is phenomenal. Another Pokemon. I love ghosts. Ghost Pokemon are great. And you're like, Krellick, how are ghosts your second favorite then? Poison types are sick. I'm not going to lie. I would be a poison type gym leader. I love my ghosts. I have so many ghost plushes over here. Or, well, I guess not that many. I guess the collection has expanded. But nevertheless, I love my ghosts. I mean, some days I might say they're my number one. But Duskull, I love it. It has its little arms behind its back. Also, it still only has one eye that floats between the two openings, the two orbitals, which is amazing. I love that. It evolves from something that just takes the life essence of children into something that consumes everything, being Dusclops, wanting to just consume as much as it can, and then finally when it evolves one last time, it is full. It doesn't necessarily need to feed anymore. It just exists as the Grim Reaper, having taken so many lives, or so many just creatures in general, that now it serves as this being of understanding, assumedly, that will ferry you to the next world in a peaceful manner, assumedly. And there's a reason why I put it as the thumbnail. It's not my favorite ghost. I would have loved to put Gengar there, but at the same time, this is spooky month. It has a jack-o'-lantern on it. It is the Grim Reaper Pokemon. How could I not? It is perfect. I'll have an opportunity for Gengar in the future. I feel like, personally, I will never have an opportunity to draw a Dusk Noir ever again for a thumbnail. So, great Pokemon. Phenomenal design. And let's move on. Drifloon. This Pokemon has two little frayed protrusions that resemble hands, allowing it to grab onto children and run away with them. Though it usually only does this to those that are rough with it, and it dislikes heavy children. I wonder why. Can't carry them away as easily. I would have been fine. I was a big boy. I would have had no problem when I was younger. Now, the X on its face does end up having a mouth, and its body is filled with air, as well as the lost spirits of people in Pokemon, expanding as it collects more souls. If it explodes, which I never even thought about this, if it explodes, the souls unleash with a screaming sound. It is also rumored that it is reincarnated from deceased humans. It is also known as the signpost for wandering spirits due to its aimless drifting. It desires company, often seeking out children and grabbing their hands, though due to how light it is, it can be resisted easily and is often pulled around. Though if the children hold on for too long, there is a rumor that the Drifloon will fly away with them and guide them into the afterlife. Despite this, they can be very friendly and helpful, and they puff up whenever they're angry or aggressive, often using its body to expand or shrink in order to express its feelings. Now, they are more common at night, residing in damp, humid locations, with inspiration potentially being from helium balloons, tentaculata comb jelly, and space jellyfish, otherwise known as atmospheric jellyfish, which are not actual jellyfish. They're just kind of the how do I put it? It's the not runoff. It's the gases and everything forming all the like little oh my gosh, how do I put it? What are they called? Why am I thinking about it? To explain space jellyfish, they're not actual jellyfish. A space jellyfish is a rocket launch related phenomenon caused by sunlight reflecting off the high altitude rocket plume gases emitted by a launching rocket during morning or evening twilight. The observer is in darkness while the exhaust plumes at high altitudes are still in direct sunlight. It might also be potentially inspired by some Kaidan ghost stories where it states that ghosts and spirits have been compared to balloons. As it evolves into Drifblim, its body contains souls said to be burdened with regrets, serving as fuel for Drifblim's gas. It is strong enough to lift Pokemon or people, but despite that has no control over its flight. So it's not incredibly threatening to me in that case. I may just keep a little pin on you. But overall, this does cause it to drift with the wind and end up anywhere. It can inflate and deflate itself to try and control its altitude at least, and it's rarely active during the day, but usually gathers in groups during the evenings. When noticed, the groups will suddenly vanish to unknown locations. And the next part is a part that bothered me a lot, and I had it on, like, I do my research, right? And sometimes I decide to do this research on stream. So if you want to see that, just keep your eye out for streams, have notifications. You can join the Discord. It's in the description of every video. So you can join along, you can join and chill. You don't have to talk. I appreciate my lurkers. And you can see how I do some of this research. Now, I was researching this on stream and found out that they like to eat Clamperl. Like, they full-on prey on Clamperl. And that bothered me incredibly. Because we can set aside everything else, right? It carries people, rumors of it carrying people to the afterlife, and there are poems and songs about, admiring its transience, melancholy aspect, but that's all understandable. When you come back to the Clamperl thing, I could not understand why. It didn't make sense, and I couldn't find anything in Bulbapedia or anything else, and the only information I could find and find research on, or I could research very personally to try and find an answer for this, was that this was potentially related to the luxuriant Pearl Princess Toyotama Hime, who was filled with an abundance of divine spirits. Luxuriant Pearl Princess, an abundance of divine spirits within her. I mean, not divine, and again, it's a loose pull, right? Maybe it does have some relation. The other one I could think of was the old practice or idea in general of giving gifts in hot air balloon rides. You'd take someone up, and you'd give them a gift. A pearl necklace, a ring, you'd propose to them something big, right? And that's the only other potential thing that I could think of that would explain why it likes to eat Clamperl, which has that nice, pretty pearl, which is not its body, it's just a pearl that it has, so shrug. But at the same time, those Clamperl, according to Pokemon Snap, never come back. So I'm incredibly lost, but that's as close as I can get, unless somebody else can try and find something and a source that would make even more sense of what I just said, or another potential lead, right? Other than that, it does have some more obvious inspiration from hot air balloons, box jellyfish, more specifically the Karukia Barnesi, and then of course, blimps. How do I feel about this Pokemon line? It's alright. It's definitely some strange, like, balloon filled with ghosts. I'll give it the pass. I'll give it the pass and say that it is a ghost. It is filled with spirits. It has some sort of spirit of its own. It's not possessing a balloon or anything like that. We don't know where they go. Technically, I guess we don't know where they come from either. We just know they exist. I'm gonna let them pass as a ghost. Spiritomb. A ghostly purple Pokemon that is attached to a stone and lacking a physical body. Its projected appearance is an ethereal composition of swirling purple energy of an unknown kind, though it does have a green face at its center. Now, I'm gonna hope that you remembered what I said about Hisuian Typhlosion, as Spiritomb is formed by the collection of 108 spirits. It is said to have been sealed into the odd keystone by a traveler roughly 500 years before the present time. It will lay curses on others and lash out at anyone with little thought, often exercising short-sightedness in pursuit of vengeance. It is rarely encountered in the wild, and the 108 spirits appear as wisps in Pokemon Legends Arceus after the seal broke and they scattered through the lands. Spiritomb itself can be just as aggressive and destructive as the spirits that it is composed up of. It can even use one of the spirits to possess others and cause misdeeds, which, the longer that Spiritomb possesses an individual, the more that their face twists and warps to look like Spiritomb. If Spiritomb loses one of these spirits, it will go on a rampage until the lost spirit is returned. Spiritomb may be based on Gimmighoul, a spirit bound to a single place, or a Sandygast, a Norwegian folklore spirit that is forced to hollow around a boundary stone as punishment for moving one when it was alive. It might also be based on the Buddhist tradition performed on New Year's Eve in Japan, in which a bell is rung 108 times to chase away the 108 temptations in order to achieve nirvana, spiritual enlightenment. Now, here's the one that I really think it is based on. Spiritomb may also be based on Water Margin, one of the classic Chinese novels, which is also very well known in Japan. In the novel's first chapter, a foolish army marshal orders the removal of a stone monument guarded by monks for generations, causing the spirits of 108 demons sealed therein to be released. These 108 souls, having atoned for their sins, become the 108 Stars of Destiny. They are reincarnated centuries later as 108 outlaws, the heroes of the novel. So, this is my overall theory on Spiritomb and Hisuian Typhlosion. Hisuian Typhlosion, we can assume, existed before the Edo period, which was the 1800s, which is basically when Hisui existed, before it became the Sinnoh region, right? As we look into this, and we look at the idea of 108, we look at the Buddhist tradition tie-ins, we look at the Japamala beads, and all this other stuff, right? And we tie it all together in the idea that Hisuian Typhlosion is meant to purify these spirits and send them off on their way. What if there are spirits that it can't actually purify? What do you do then? You're supposed to guide them. You're supposed to be this psychopomp for these lost spirits. And now you have these evil spirits you cannot actually guide. But despite that, it's still plucking these spirits out of the weave, per se, and is placing them where it feels is best. That's why it kept looking at the spiritual flow. It's doing this against their will to some capacity, and it holds power over them. So, knowing that it can't purify them, or seeing the evil in the hearts of these 108 spirits once they are collected, Hisuian Typhlosion then takes them and seals them away, having them atone for their sins. As time goes on, this odd keystone that they are sealed in ends up cracking, it ends up breaking, and they are unsealed, released, but they stay together. And instead of truly having atoned for their sins, they have decided to instead stay evil, to continue sinning, because they have not served their time, truly. And a reference to this is shown in the Pokemon anime as they come across this, like, tomb shrine of some sorts, and when it breaks open, it reveals the odd keystone in which Spiritomb releases itself from. And the clouds in the sky, and the sky itself darkens, and it is seen as this cataclysmic event, basically. Not like truly cataclysmic, I'm being over dramatic, but nevertheless, it's this moment of, uh-oh, we done messed up, son. So, really cool, and I think they are very much tied together. You can argue another way, and I always encourage alternative arguments, especially with additional evidence. I will never turn those down. I find them fun, and it only improves my content and allows me to relay some of that information to you guys, or have those as alternative theories or ideas when I cover, you know, stuff a second time, or update information, or whatever it is. There's a lot of overlap that happens, and sometimes you just, you know, you gotta keep updating. It's what science is. So, looking at Spiritomb, though, I love Spiritomb. How could you not? First time you see it, Cynthia. Cynthia drags your body across the ground, through the nails and spikes and sand, through the cactus field and the salt rock lands, and finally drops you off in a pool of lemon juice because Spiritomb did not have a weakness. Spiritomb, the Ghost Dark type, did not have a weakness until Fairy types came out. It made it not only a strong Pokemon because of its abilities and everything else, but also one without weakness, and that was amazing. And I know Sableye, another Ghost Dark type, but just there's something about Spiritomb that sets it way above Sableye, where when I think of the first Ghost Dark type, I don't think of the one that actually came first. I end up thinking about Spiritomb for some reason. It's oddly enough just the way that it goes, and I apologize, but it's iconic, and it looks so cool. Moving forward, we get one of Snowrunt's evolutions, Froslass. A kimono-like Pokemon with a band around its waist reminiscent of an obi. Its face resembles a mask, and it is very, very, very much based on the Yuki-Onna. Living in snowy areas, having the ability to freeze foes with its negative 58-degree Fahrenheit breath, and it's thought that what it does is after it freezes its foes, or victims rather, it displays them within its home, where it then uses them as decoration, eventually deciding to eat their nice frozen soul. Yeah, your soul is frozen, not just you, your soul, as its favorite treat. Now, it lays curses on men who misbehave, it creates illusions to manipulate others, and it knocks on doors during blizzards wanting to come in, so you best not open that door. And it is a female-only species said to have been formed when the spirit and lingering regrets of a woman who was lost in the mountains possessed an icicle. Honestly, very parallel to the Yuki-Onna while also looking like a Kokeshi doll. And I did end up reading on stream the full story of the Yuki-Onna, or at least one of the oldest renditions of the Yuki-Onna. Thank you to Joe. Why that felt so weird to say Joe like that. I don't know why, but that's his username. It's Joe, or Phantom rather. Either way, for actually handing that off to me and me being able to read it, because I never fully read the story or any story of the Yuki-Onna before, and the story basically, long and short of the Yuki-Onna, or at least this version of the story, was that two men were in a hut, and they decided, they did their fishing and everything, they did everything they were supposed to, and they go back to the hut. They're still, they're like, it's too cold, blizzard's coming in, we need to stay the night. So while they're staying the night, the door opens, and this perfectly, pale white, pristine, cold lady comes in. He describes her as beautiful. And he does actually, let me correct myself, because he doesn't notice her. She came in, and he only notices her when she's already, stooping over the older male in the room and breathing ice and just the power of the blizzard onto him, killing him in his sleep. And she looks at him and it's like, I won't kill you. I can tell that you don't have all this evil in your soul. As such, I will let you live. But you will not tell a single soul about this, not even your mother, not your future wife, nothing. You are not allowed, because if you do, I will kill you. And she leaves, letting him stay alive. He then spends all these years doing all these different things. He continues to fish. He's a little lonelier now. He never tells his mother, and he lives his life as he did before, now without this friend. Eventually, he ends up coming across a young lady as he's walking down the road, and she is like this. He describes her as very fair-skinned, and of course, in the past, when you say fair-skinned, that's very white, okay? So, this porcelain white lady with black hair and all this other stuff, and they relate to each other and all these other things going on, right? And they do the cute little thing of, oh, do you have somebody that you're betrothed to? No, do you? No. And it's like, okay, fantastic. And you probably see where this is going. They get married, they have 9 kids, and I'm like, oh my god, stay off of her. And eventually, after all this time, 9 kids, we're talking, I don't know how she survived in those times, but nevertheless, 9 kids, we're talking easily maybe 12 years, right? A 12-year difference added on to maybe 3 years since the initial events of it all. So 12 to 15 years after it all. Because I don't remember reading a time frame, right? And he's like, you know, I kept this a secret for so long, but I just got reminded of this, and I'm gonna tell you, you look like this person. She's like, oh, well, what do I look like? And he tells her about the Yuki-onna. And that's when she, like, gets bigger, just, like, stoops over him, transforms, but still has this beautiful face and everything, and tells him, were it not for the fact that we have 9 children together, and I want them to stay safe, I would kill you here and now for breaking your promise, for breaking the one rule that I put upon you and your soul as a mortal human male. You best treat these children right, and if they are ever given a proper reason to complain about you, I will end you. Otherwise, you will be allowed to live. And that's basically where the story ends. And relatively similar, but also very different as we bring all of bring these ideas together and create Froslass. Opinions? Froslass is pretty freaking cool. Not gonna lie. I love the idea of Froslass being out here, and it'll sneak behind men and just gone. You know what I mean? Oh god, oh, I'm gonna be gone. Oh no. But Coolmon, very much a ghost. Like, especially if we're gonna go by the Yuki-onna stories, or even just go by Froslass stories, it is a wandering spirit with regrets, born within the ice-cold mountains after its mortal death. Next up, we have Rotom. With the ability to possess all sorts of appliances, this Pokemon was put to work by Clement to create the Rotom Dex, eventually leading to other items such as Rotom drones and bikes. Though before this, it possessed microwave ovens, washing machines, refrigerators, electric fans, and lawnmowers. Its body is made of plasma and has just this whitish blue aura of electricity around it that forms lightning bolt-shaped appendages. When moving quickly, the appendages seem to disappear and lightning trails behind it. In its base form, it is seen to apparently be possessing a light bulb, and it lacks any true sort of circulatory system or pulse. They typically entered appliances in order to cause mischief, pulling pranks on unsuspecting people, but it has taken to inhabiting these objects as time goes on in order to help others rather than just cause mischief. Through possessing a phone now, it can now speak human languages, demonstrating that they are highly intelligent Pokemon. They tend to reside in abandoned buildings, and research continues on it to this day, and its ability to power unique motors. In Rotom's Wish, one Rotom was even shown to be able to time travel. Its original forms were said to have been discovered by a Team Galactic commander, Charon, otherwise known as Pluto. Though Rotom existed even during Hisui times, long before Pluto. The electric fan that Rotom inhabits to become a fan Rotom was invented by a boy, and was the first Rotom-related appliance to be developed, leading to the creation of many other appliances like it. The washing machine model that Rotom can inhabit has been discontinued, which caused its price to skyrocket, and Heat Rotom will become lethargic if the oven it possesses starts malfunctioning. This one's fairly straightforward, as we have its relation to Poltergeists, which are ghosts that will possess objects, or Tsukumogami, which are spirits that possess household items. Also, Rotom is literally just motor backwards. Now, Rotom's great. I like Rotom. I love its little mischievous nature. I love the face that it has. Everything about Rotom I think is great. I question if it's actually a ghost or not. And if it's just a ghost because it quote-unquote possesses objects. It is a ghost electric type, so maybe it's just the fact that it is a kind of like Gastly. Somehow there's a spirit inside of an inanimate energy. You had gas there, we have plasma here. And as such, this plasma can go inside of electric objects and control them. It's not possessing people. Is it itself a spirit? No, its body is composed of plasma. I would argue it has ghost-like qualities due to possession of inanimate objects, but Rotom itself is not an actual ghost. Though, I will admit, the first time I ever saw Rotom, and I think it's the first time you see Rotom in general in the games, is pretty sick, as it comes out from the TV, like from the Pokemon like scary haunted mansion place, and that's amazing. It's one of the things about Pokemon, or one of the events or moments in Pokemon that will never leave me. It will stay with me forever, for as long as I live. Here we go. Here's a real nice big one for you, as we have Giratina, the Distortion World resident itself. Its ghostly wings resemble large claws that can change shape as if made of a liquid or gas. And on its legs, the bands are reminiscent of shackles, representing when it was banished to the Distortion World that it rules over. When there, it remains in its altered form. And according to myths and legends from the Hisui/Sinnoh region, in the beginning of time, Arceus created the Pokemon of antimatter, Giratina, the Pokemon of time, Dialga, and the Pokemon of space, Palkia, all three in their origin forms. After the Pokemon universe was created, due to Giratina's violent nature, Arceus banished it from our world completely and onto the reverse side of the Pokemon world, now known as the Distortion World. It is known to be highly aggressive and territorial, has been reported to appear in ancient cemeteries, has the power to tear a hole in reality, creating a space-time rift along with driving both Dialga and Palkia berserk, not dessert, and that rift can also cause huge lightnings that drive noble Pokemon into frenzied states. It can cloak itself in darkness as it attacks, and is said to be equal in strength to Dialga and Palkia. It, at one point, carried a large grudge against its creator, Arceus, and was willing to stand against it with the help of Volo. But after being defeated in battle, it started to change its ways and protect the universe from threats such as Cyrus. Due to its typically violent nature, the history of Giratina was covered up due to ancient people fearing it. It's kind of like, there's a lot of different theories, like there's a lot of power in a name, which is a very interesting concept to me. Like that can be in knowing someone's true name. If you look at like the Aragon series, which, gosh, that was very much a young adult novel. I loved that when I was younger. And then you look at other stuff, like if you look at The Conjuring and knowing the name of a demon, so that way you can actually banish it properly when you say the verses from the Bible. There's so much in knowing a true name, or knowing names in general. I've even seen it where you just don't mention a name, like in Native American, or I believe even Jewish, Hebrew more specifically, cultures and religions. You should not say the name of certain demons or evil creatures in general, as by saying their name, you are bringing misfortune upon you by their hands, attracting them to you. That could be applied to Giratina, in my opinion here. Now, let's continue down the line, as it is said to have observed the real world silently while in its home dimension, being able to open portals through any reflective surface as it keeps both worlds in balance. It is known by many names. Banished Pokemon, Arceus' Shadow, the Pokemon of Shadows, and being on the other side of our world, almost as if it's a mirror of our own world, which makes sense why it can open these portals on any reflective surface. In origin form, it is said to be able to travel through and control dimensions besides those of time and space. When outside of its home, it transforms into this through the Grisius Orb and could even rival Arceus if it was given the right assistance. It can turn itself into a shadow and merge the Distortion and Pokemon world together, as seen during the events of Spirit Pillar, though the Spirit Pillar was almost destroyed as a side effect of this, alongside so much more. there is, as with many legendary Pokemon, so much that this could be based on. And I'm almost just going to direct quote a lot of this information because there's so much. Legendaries, they're beautiful. The sheer amount of information that come together to build them up, especially these origin ones, where they are an amalgamation of religions and beliefs and ideas from around the world. So, Giratina may also draw inspiration from fallen angels, celestial beings that rebelled against God and were excommunicated to hell, analogous to Giratina being exiled by Arceus to another dimension due to its belligerent nature. Furthermore, it might allude to Samael, who is the ruler of the fifth heaven and has grim and destructive duties whilst being a member of a heavenly host. In its altered form, Giratina resembles a European dragon or sauropod. It also shares similarities with some kaiju depictions in modern popular media. Its wings may have been based off of a bat's, and its body has insect-like six-legged features. Its origin form's serpentine body may be based on a Chinese dragon or amphitheater, or an umukade, a giant centipede, I hate centipedes, with dragon-like features, said to prey on dragons and be as large as a mountain. It may also be based on a seraph, a class of angels known for its 6 wings and, in some depictions, a serpentine body. Similarly, it also shares some similarities with other serpents or dragon-like creatures in Abrahamic religions, such as the ancient serpent or the Leviathan. The design of its 6 wings may be based on a scorpion stinger or spider legs. And additionally, its ghost type may parallel its counterpart's type, Palkia being water, Dialga being steel, referencing the 3 primary states of matter: gas, liquid, and solid. Now is a great time for me to tell you that this month I am also going to be reviewing, and I will make it a longer video because you guys just love me dissecting stuff. You guys love talking about it and dissecting stuff and everything. The Giratina and the Sky Warrior movie. I was stuck between Giratina and Darkrai because I was like, what's the quote-unquote scarier one? I know they're children's movies, but what really messed with kids' heads when they first saw it? And it was like, oh, Giratina's just ever so slightly up there because of all the different dimensions and all this other stuff, and I've never seen either of them. So I'm going to be watching that, reviewing it, I'll dissect it, I'll give my opinion on it, so on and so forth, because it just sounds fun and a nice shorter video, even though I'll still make it like an hour and a half long probably. And no, I'm not going to be just reacting to it as I silently eat popcorn. No, I will have a proper good review, and I, as a person, I'm a positive reviewer. If it's dumb, I'm going to say it's dumb, but I'm probably going to be like, I still loved it anyway. You know, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to be more positive. I don't know. I don't like being a jerk when it comes to movies or anything like that, unless it's truly awful, because there's a lot of movies where it's just opinion. Like, I'm gonna be real. The Babadook movie has great reviews in terms of conceptualization, cinematography, and the visuals of it. Pretty solid. I just do not care for it otherwise, and I get the idea of it all, and it's also really funny that the Babadook became a was it LGBTQ icon? No idea how that happened. That one's an interesting one that I would like to look into at some point on my own time. That's an interesting one. But overall, it's not one for me. Meanwhile, I look at a lot of these other movies where I'm like, oh, here's a stupid movie. I know it's not good. If I had to talk about it in a cinematography place, terrible. Kung Pao Enter the Fist. It's not a horror movie. It's a comedy. Love it. It's stupid. It's so dumb, but man, it's a funny movie that I'm imagining moments in my head right now, and I'm smiling because of it, because it's so funny, and I love it as a movie. So, just be prepared for that. I'm a positive reviewer. I'm not gonna tear it down, and of course, I like to make jokes, so expect that. Now, and I'll talk about Giratina a ton during that. Now, speaking of Giratina, I love Giratina. One of my favorite legendaries of all time. I remember going through, oh gosh, was it the Ruins of Elf? I don't remember. I remember playing, and I'm kind of going into my head, into the recesses of my memory. And I remember where I was going through the ruins, walking through, moving my way down, and I realized I could go deeper. I could go deeper. I could go deeper. I could go deeper. Keep going, until eventually I'm running out of healing items. I'm running out of revives. I am like 12 or 14 at the time maximum. I think I'm like 12 at the time. And I'm going down, and I'm running out of resources. Everything's getting scarier, and these like levels, 50, 60 Pokemon are popping out in the wild, left, right, and center. I'm getting trounced. My team is down. I have like one Pokemon left, maybe two, and they have basically no health. And I get into this room, and I see on the edges that the room has changed. There's not an opening here, and there's not an opening there. There's not a stairway leading me to another place high or low. It's all enclosed, and standing at the center of it all as I move forward above all of it on this tiny little mountain, staring down at me, waiting to walk up, is Giratina, ready. And I walk up, and I sit, and I think to myself, I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna lose, and it's done. I'm not gonna get Giratina, because I didn't save scum back then. It just wasn't something that I did. And so I walk up, I'm like, I have one option. I've got one option. I have a quick ball. I get into this battle, and I look at Giratina, and just, whew, ding, boom, 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 and I hear I caught it. I was like, what? Full health, quick ball, Giratina. I don't remember what was it, level 70? I don't remember. It's been years. So many years, and I will never forget that moment. You know what? I don't care if somebody else is like, oh, it was probably a dream. Oh, and then everybody clapped. Like, I don't care. That is what I remember. That is what I remember. I remember so many other moments. And you can, if you watch my Nuzlocke, if you watch when I stream when I play through Pokemon games, my luck when it comes to getting Pokemon in one ball is insane. Go watch when I played Pokemon Legends Arceus for the first time. It's a solid edit, and I feel confident in it, but I feel like I could do better these days. But there are moments after moments where I'm like, throw the ball, and I get it in one. And it's just like, even chat is sitting there like, why? Why do you have this luck? And it's just there. And Giratina made such an impact on me, even without seeing its origin form. Oh my gosh, when I got to see its alternate form, its original form for the first time, I was in love. I love Giratina. It is a beautiful Pokemon. I'm excited to watch the movie. I'm excited to talk about it more in the future, because I would also love to make a video on Arceus, the Origin Trio, and then Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf as well in one video together, as they are the basis for so much of what Pokemon is. I don't know. There's your gushing on a Pokemon that very much deserves it, Giratina. I hope you're excited for the movie review. And let's move on. Yamask, or as I'm going to pronounce it, Yamask, but I wanted to give you the right pronunciation once. Once a human long ago, Yamask retains its memories from before it became a Pokemon. It carries a mask representing the face of its former self, becoming furious if the mask is lost or taken away. It is capable of speech when only possessing a human, which happens if you wear the mask. It may look at the mask and then cry, thought to be in longing of its former life. It wanders the ruins of ancient civilizations. And we're gonna have three more Pokemon to cover here, because we have its alternate form, and then Cofragrigus and Runerigus. So we're gonna get through these, and then I'll talk about them all, just as a small reminder here, because we're gonna cover a lot with these. Now, Yamask may be based on the Egyptian Ba, a person's soul, which is depicted as a bird with a human head, or swoot. Swoot? I think it's swoot. Swoot? The shadow of or silhouette of a person's soul, both appearing after the person's death. It also has a similar body shape of the Eye of Horus, and the mask itself is likely a death mask, which
death masks, if I'm remembering properly, you would place them on before you would die, or it would be on your, like, on your body that is now deceased. Then we have, in my opinion, the cooler Galarian Yamask. Now with purple eyes, purple's my favorite color, and a clay tablet attached to its tail. It was born when the tablet was drawn to a vengeful spirit. It bears cursed engravings that resemble a serpent's tail and is said to absorb Yamask's dark power. The process, brought on by an ancient curse, triggers Galarian Yamask's evolution into Runerigus. The clay tablet may be based on runestones or even the Daldagast, which, as we've talked about, is a Norwegian folklore spirit forced to haul around that boundary stone as punishment for moving one when it was alive. The idea that it has to take 49 points of damage in order to evolve as you move it near some very tomb-like structures as well could all relate to the Antarava, a Buddhist concept of purgatory after death and before reincarnation, which is said to last 49 days. And we'll finish with that idea after we talk about Cofragrigus and Runerigus. And I will say here again, this is not something that I personally, like, I looked into it to confirm it, but otherwise, like, the people on who make these, like, Wikipedias and everything for Pokemon, I don't know where they get their information from, but gosh, is it so there's these thin lines that come together the way that they do, and I get some of it, where sometimes it's like I did with Drifblim, where it's like, okay, I literally looked up Ghost Pearl or Yokai Pearl, and I got the Princess Pearl thingamajig, right? So I guess you can follow those lines of logic and get where you are, but they might have some insider information, which would be pretty freaking cool to find out. But let's talk about Cofragrigus. The coffin is made of a solid gold that is now possessed. Ancient legends once told Cofragrigus could seal nearby humans inside of them and turn them into mummies. Grave robbers mistaking them for normal coffins would fall to this fate as it simply waits for its next victim. Hey John, I'm gonna open up this coffin over here. Ah! Just gone. Just immediately gone. It's kind of funny. It, of course, being this golden coffin, is a symbol of wealth for kings from a bygone era. It is shown to be able to open its body like a normal sarcophagus and enjoys eating gold nuggets and no longer remembers once being human. That is terrifying. When you have something that has the emotions of a human, has the powers beyond our own, and holds on to these emotions without the memory of why they exist, you now have an animal fueled by just the power of the grudge and emotion of a sentient being, which can only amplify it further, and they will not stop with any reasoning whatsoever. Cofragrigus also just, oh my gosh, it's a horror monster, right? I need to give my opinions later. I'm gonna get back on track, I'm sorry. It very much resembles King Tutankhamun's coffin and mask, and its shiny possibly is inspired by the sarcophagus of Akhenaten, and the mummy ability possibly being a reference to the curse of ancient Egyptian kings, as coming in contact with it changes the opposing Pokemon's ability to the mummy ability to match Cofragrigus, which that, again, goes to the idea of you open up the tomb, and there have been so many stories of people going into tombs or touching things they shouldn't inside of these pyramids, inside of these grave areas within the pyramids, and horrible things resulting afterwards. And that goes kind of hand in hand with a lot of biblical stuff, and the idea of all these curses. So it kind of matches, again, with the mummy ability. Its Japanese name is a little bit funny, as Deskan may be a combination of death and coffin. It may also be a pun on deska, a form used at the end of an interrogative sentence, which can be translated as "is it?" Which deska, like if you ask, like, is it rice? What is it? Korewa, or is this rice? It's like korewa gohan desu ka? You know, gosh, I need to pick up Rosetta Stone. I know I said it earlier in this video, but the more I talk in Japanese again, the more I need to just sit down, pull Duolingo back up. I barely escaped with my life last time. I'll be playing with the devil by letting it back into my life this time. But you know what? I think it'll be worth it. Not sponsored, but willing to be. Let's shift things over to Runerigus, though, as we have now the full serpent depicted in the runes, bending and twisting on itself, reminiscent of the world serpent Jormungandr of Norse mythology. Those runestones are very similar to the England runestones erected in remembrance of Vikings who traveled to England and died there, having motifs in the shape of serpents or dragons. Alternatively, it could also be Apep, the serpentine primordial embodiment of chaos in Egyptian mythology. The runestones are believed to have mystical properties that conveyed powers of protection, wealth, and victory. Potentially even have curses, warning that anyone who damages or moves them would be doomed to death, or at least being forced to be an outcast. Now, this is very much like how Galarian Yamask seems to have been created, especially based on its description. And looking at the Dusty Bowl, we do see that it resembles a dolmen, and which dolmen is that sealed tomb that is there, in addition to the monoliths around it resembling to be, in stone structures, the shape of a ship. Now it's on to my opinion segment of these bad boys, and I love them so much. They are ghosts. They are wandering spirits. I'm gonna say that here and now. They are ghosts. They are wandering spirits. They are wraiths of some capacity, potentially. They are curses. They are living curses. And more specifically, that stone tablet is a living curse, because Runerigus is not the same as Cofragrigus, where Cofragrigus is the evolution of Yamask. Runerigus is more akin to the evolution of the stone tablet. So if you really want to, like, be picky about it, which I recommend sometimes, you can state, in my opinion, that Cofragrigus is a ghost, but Cofragrigus and Yamask, including Galarian Yamask, are all ghosts. But when you get to Runerigus, it is no longer a ghost. It is just a living curse, because of the tablet being that actual creature, being the actual living, quote-unquote, Pokemon. Now, I love them. Cofragrigus is incredibly scary. I've seen it like I played Pokeblock, I think it was, on Minecraft a long time ago, and when it moves around, it's like moving around on all fours like some little demon looking for cheese at 3 a.m. And that's terrifying. I said I want nothing to do with that. Meanwhile, you look at Runerigus, and I love the visual concept and organization that is there regarding Buddhism and Jormungandr and all this other stuff that really comes together. I'm a little biased, as like I guess I don't talk about it because I don't consider myself incredibly devout, but I'm not afraid to admit it, as I've talked about sensitive topics before, and I don't want to cause problems. As I hope you understand from watching my videos that I'm a very accepting and open person, especially through my community. Thank you guys for being that as well. But I'm like a mix of like non-denominate Christianity, I suppose, being raised Catholic and all this other stuff, but then also having Zen Buddhism practices just for how I want to display myself as a person and be as a person. So this kind of hits in a very like fun and special spot for me, as it lines up in these ways. Even though it's still fairly loose, it's cool. And even though Jormungandr is also not a Buddhism concept, it's amazing. I have a fascination with this old world serpent, because I believe it's also, because it's known as the world serpent, it can also be seen in a number of different lights, like the Ouroboros, or, you know, the snake that eats its own tail and it stays alive indefinitely, which is the idea of life, death, rebirth. And it all comes together for this Pokemon. Think about it. It was somebody who was alive that messed with the death of another individual, in turn being cursed to wander the earth indefinitely, reborn as a Pokemon that will eventually evolve and be a living, quote-unquote, testament to the afterlife, and things that should not be done. Also just think the design is freaking sick, so what do you want from me? Great Pokemon. Moving on. So you're gonna notice a couple of changes. I may have recorded the previous parts almost like a whole week ago just because some things came up in life, and I'm not even wearing the same shirt because I left the other shirt at the place where I had to be. Now, before I continue though, I'm supposed to cover Zorua and Zoroark next, but since I've covered them before, and I'm already covering a couple of other Pokemon that I've already covered before, I wanted to let you guys have a nice and fresh take on it as I pass this on over to our guest, Thunderzolt.
Thanks to Krillix bringing me on this video, I get to talk about one of the coolest Pokemon of recent time, Hisuian Zorua and Zoroark. And when these Pokemon first got revealed, I was genuinely hyped for them since they are the first normal Ghost-type Pokemon in existence. This is a type that I've been waiting for a while, since as a kid I always wanted a normal Ghost-type Pokemon. A Fakemon design I even thought of was a Possum, since they always play dead, so it can be like a normal Ghost-type, haha. But I digress. This Pokemon just looks cool, and its backstory is even cooler. Many years ago from the main series Pokemon games, there was the Hisui region, and even though Zorua originates from Unova, these group of Pokemon decided to migrate to the Hisui region, and they realized pretty quickly that the temperature here is pretty harsh. It also didn't help that the locals were scared of Zorua, since they have really powerful abilities to create illusions which frighten the locals a lot. These people wanted absolutely nothing to do with the Zoruas and casted them away. Because of these people not being hospitable, like everything in life, these actions had consequences. The Zoruas were unable to adapt to the harsh weather conditions of the Hisui region, and they all died. These Pokemon ended up bearing so much hatred in their heart, even through death, where they were able to be reborn as a new form, the Hisui Zorua line. This line of Pokemon is a true ghost, and they literally use all of their illusion power now to trick and scare humans, since they casted them away when they were regular Zorua. A direct Pokédex quote on this Pokemon is, "A once departed soul returns to life in Hisui, derives power from resentment, which raises energy from the top of its head and takes a form of its foes. In this way, Zorua vents its lingering malice." So in layman's terms, Zorua died because it got abused, and now it's pissed at humans. As a Zorua, it doesn't actually terrorize humans as much as you would have thought. It just steals their foods, creates illusions, and sometimes it's just an annoying pain. But as we all should know, Zorua isn't the final form of this evolutionary line, because there is also Hisuian Zoroark, which is a lot more terrifying. Typically, Hisuian Zoroarks would exist from Hisuian Zoruas evolving, but in a Pokemon special titled Onto the Icy Blue, we end up learning a much more sinister way these Pokemon can transform into Hisuian Zoroark. This special starts off pretty gruesome, where we see that Zoruas have been outcasted from humanity, and they're just dying, literally freezing in ice, and nobody's there to help them. We end up seeing a silhouette of a Zoroark looking over its dead child, and you can even hear it sobbing a bit. This Zoroark is going through extreme grief that its kid is now dead. This Zoroark ends up channeling all its hatred towards human in a rage, screaming out, and it can be presumed here it turned into an Hisuian Zoroark. And considering this Pokemon is a ghost, the implication here is that the Zoroark got so stressed out and mad that it literally died and transformed into this Pokemon. And this Pokemon is honestly no joke. Its illusions are generally frightening, and its design is just amazingly cool but also scary. Hisuian Zoroark even has the ability to make illusions of people talking to trick humans into believing they're having conversations with other humans. This Pokemon generally hates living in the human world, since it never did anything good towards it only gave it pain. This Pokemon literally has the power to drive a human into insanity. All this didn't help the reputation of this Pokemon, since the people feared Hisuian Zoroark so much more, since unlike Zorua, Zoroark's illusions are so much more potent and harmful. There's even folklore within the Hisui region that if you encounter an Hisuian Zoroark at night, this Pokemon will attack without mercy, and you can literally feel the pain and bitterness within every strike. This Pokemon is the pure embodiment of vengeance. It should also be noted that this Pokemon isn't pure evil, since if you get on its good side, it really cares about about you, like a lot, just like it probably cared about its dead child. And honestly, this story is just a much more gruesome version of the Marowak story with Cubone from the Pokemon Ghost Cemetery. Overall, for being a ghost type Pokemon, the first normal ghost type one, this lore is absolutely insane and I absolutely love it. This Pokemon is typically a fan favorite within the community and it's easy to see why. This Pokemon does also have a pretty good redemption story in the 3rd episode of the Zoroark special where it ends up saving everybody, and it's so cool that the implication is that this Pokemon is a ghost since when the protagonist wakes up, Zoroark is gone. Overall, it's cool seeing when Game Freak takes strides like this and creating incredible lore for these cool ghost type Pokemon unlike others, since this Pokemon is literally the pure embodiment of tragedy, loss, and emotional hatred towards people that neglect them. So even though the first normal ghost type wasn't my Fakemon idea of a possum playing dead, which I still think is an incredible idea, so you are free to steal it, Game Freak, I'm pretty happy that this Pokemon has the crown of being the one and only normal ghost type Pokemon, since it's really cool.
Now that we're back, thank you so much. Please go check out Thunder's results. It feels very weird saying that considering Thunder has way more subscribers than I do, but at the same time, great guy, great content, and also honestly looking at the same type of or similar content that I'm creating, as we both like to delve deep into Pokemon as a whole. So there's a nice other channel for content similar to my own that you can look into that I personally trust. Now let's continue. Continuing with Frillish, a blue or pink prince or princess jellyfish, depending on their gender of course, living within the deepest parts of the ocean, within ocean trenches that range between 6 to 11 kilometers, or for us Americans, 3.7 to 6.8 miles. This is also known as the Haddle Zone, I'm actually not entirely sure how to pronounce that, but this basically means that it is coping with dark and high pressure conditions. Frillish is carnivorous, gently floating with the waves until it can strike at prey. First, what it does is it makes them numb with some poison spikes, then drags the victim into their den. Its arms are actually filled with tens of thousands of these poison stingers. There's also a legend stating that they used to be residents of what is now a sunken ancient city, but those people have since transformed into Frillish. Atlantis! So, there's that. Now, it preys primarily on Magikarp and Lantern, and may even destroy ships on purpose, feeding on the crew now floating in the open waters. It is also likely inspired by Norahion, a jellyfish yokai that is either shown as a demonized jellyfish or as a jellyfish-like man who wears refined, sometimes regal clothing. From yokai.com I read, Norahion, goodness gracious, shows up on evenings when a household is extremely busy. He arrives at homes unexpectedly in his splendid palanquin and slips into the house unnoticed by anyone. He acts in all respects as if he were the master of the house, helping himself to the family's luxuries such as fine teas and tobacco. His power is so great that even the real owners of the house can do nothing to stop him. In fact, even after they finally notice his presence, the owners believe the Norahion to actually be the rightful master of the house. Eventually, he leaves just as he came, quietly and politely, slipping out of the house and into his palanquin, as the owners of the house obsequiously bow and wave him farewell. Only after he has left does anyone become suspicious of the mysterious old man who just visited. Now, it could also be inspired by Stigio Medusa, which is the phantom jelly that is a deep sea jellyfish with fabric-like arms, which, looks like Frillish's frilly arms. Though its arms themselves, which the two main ones, are more reminiscent of squid than they are real jellyfish. As for Jellicent, its evolution, the King Pringle and Queen with a Beard, yeah, I'm ruining that for you. Wow, if I could just speak a little bit better. They absorb seawater and project it from their head, the little crown they have, allowing it to navigate throughout the sea. Its body composition is similar to seawater, and they gather in schools to hunt for prey under a full moon. It's taken down cruise ships and tankers and so much more, so they're taking out big boys. And these ships, their crew, the passengers, everybody on them, are never seen again. Unless you take a trip to their lair, which is made from the remains of these sea vessels, so you might find a few skeletons there if Pokemon ever decides they want to do that. It does feed on life energy, and the more it feeds, the bigger the crown gets, keeping that visual representation for that kill count. Now, adding to the inspiration from Frillish, we now have the crown jellyfish, kind of a duh, and jelly blubber, alongside many other jellyfish that are capable of killing humans, even the Kraken itself. Now, when it comes to these two Pokemon, they didn't make a huge impact on me. Honestly, I love my ghost types, as I've stated before. I think I would have done them on my team earlier if I had seen them earlier. A water ghost type seems pretty snazzy, and I think before this point, there wasn't one whatsoever. Also, I feel like I would have talked about it, so I feel like I should know that. But nevertheless, solid Mon. I just think of the Pringles can, and the lady has a beard. Let's move on. Litwick. A living candle, which is powered by life energy that it absorbs. It pretends to guide people and Pokemon, illuminating dark areas, when in reality, it is just guiding them for as long as it can, while sucking away their energy, and leads those people to the ghost world. Mind you, that doesn't say the afterlife, it said the ghost world. So, I guess there's another world to add to my list of parallel universes to start looking into, right? Now, the flame on its head does grow larger as it absorbs life energy and interferes with electronic devices such as the Pokédexes themselves. Now, its Japanese name, Hitomoshi, can literally mean lighting a lamp, but it could also refer to a person who leads a funeral procession with the torch. What is it doing to you? It is guiding you to your funeral. Now, alternatively, it can also be interpreted as Hitomoshi, which means to burn a man to death. These Japanese names are pretty freaking sick, I'm not gonna lie. It throws me off just how graphic some of those can be for a kid's game, you know? And of course, it can also relate to Hitodama or Will-o'-the-Wisps, as they are known. Next up, we have Lampent, its evolution, which can sense when someone is about to die. When it does so, it floats over and visits and steals the spirit from the person's body. Just yoink right before it could go to the afterlife. It's most often found in deep forests, so it quietly wanders through cities and hangs around near hospitals to take advantage of those soon to pass. It'll even pretend to just be a normal lamp. The spirits it absorbs do fuel the flame that it has, and may even work alongside Litwick to achieve their goals together. It could also be kind of a more Western version of what we talked about of the Chochinobake, as it is a living oil street lamp rather than it being like a living paper lantern. Finally, we get its evolution. Evolving via the use of a Duskull, we get Chandelure, the sentient chandelier that resides in rundown mansions. When it encounters its next victim, it first hypnotizes them, then envelops them in flames that don't burn the body, but instead burn your spirit, making your spirit lose its way and being forced to wander the mortal world forever. Rumor has it that those who lived in homes illuminated by Chandelure had funerals as a common occurrence, basically meaning that the families who owned these Chandelures were just having people drop dead left, right, and center because of its abilities. This line as a whole, in my opinion, I love it. I saw Litwick, I thought it was cute, slapped it on my team immediately. Ghost Fire type, how could I not? I'm a sucker for it. And it evolves into Lampent, fell in love even further, and I really wanted that Chandelure, but I did not realize I needed a Duskstone in order to evolve it for whatever reason there was. I also just don't think I got it. I'm not sure when you even get a Duskstone in the game. Maybe it was post-game. I don't know. All I know is I really love the Pokemon. It's also kind of sick now that I think about it that it's in Pokken tournaments as a, just as a character you can play as. That's kind of sick, I gotta admit. And I'd say it's one of like the higher up ghost types that are here. Made a really good impact on me, at least. It's just great gothic design, great Pokemon overall, and ultimately it's hard to say if it's actually a ghost or not. It doesn't need the flame to actually be alive. It just fuels the flame, but it's not really possessing anything either. So, you can go either way, in my opinion, if this is actually a ghost or not. I think I'm just going to place it in the not really a ghost. Golett, a little roly boy that burns energy in its core in order to move. The energy emanating comes in the form of light that comes out near Golett's arms and legs, but where this energy resides from is unknown. So, I mean, some people have thought up a couple of different theories in the Pokemon world, suspecting that they've been alive and active for thousands of years based on how they look and based on, you know, all the other information that they can put together, but that energy that fuels them is soon to run out. Now, a strange thing that they don't quite understand why it does it is that it actually decides to roll boulders together. And it itself is made from clay and thought to have been created by the science of an ancient and mysterious civilization. Now, it is a golem, but may also take inspiration from hanawa, funerary objects made from terracotta clay that are specific to Japanese anthropological records, and potentially cannonballs, as it does kind of pull everything in and roll around. This can also be supported by its evolution, Golurk, which could explain why all the Goletts are rolling balls together, because maybe those ancient civilizations helped put that together, all the clay from the boulders, rip it apart, put it into Goletts, and make a Golurk. The living cannon golem protecting castle walls and thought to be powered by perpetual motion machines within its body. Basically, if you don't know what perpetual motion is, the dirty and simple version of it is that if I move, I produce energy, but it costs energy to move, but because I'm moving, I'm producing more energy. So it consistently fuels itself. It is something that is basically impossible. You know, watch as in 300 years, someone somehow finds this video and I get a comment saying, well, actually, and then I'll be like, I'm dead. What do you want from me? To correct the video? I'm gone! Now, God, that's dark. Now, it can use its arms and Roman-like little armor skirt as rockets to fly through the sky and fly at Mach speeds. Freaking fast as heck, boy. Now, if the seal on its chest is removed, its energy runs wild, its yellow glowing parts turns red, and it rages uncontrollably, attacking indiscriminately, and all with the power to turn an entire town to nothing but rubble. It was originally thought to have been invented to serve as a laborer protector, especially as it typically follows orders without question. It is very, very much like the Jewish story of the Golem of Prague. Now, I've read this previously, and allow me to explain it here. Basically, the long story short of it is, if you look at the Golem of Prague, they look very similar and they even both have the bandage across their body along kind of like a cracking area, right? The only big difference between the Golem of Prague and Golurk is that Golurk, you take the bandage off and it goes on a rampage. When you take the bandage off of the Golem of Prague, it doesn't go on a rampage, but instead walks around, protected the Jewish people from, probably can't say that word, not on YouTube, but I think you get the idea. Those that might prosecute them unjustifiably, very horribly. I think you get the idea. Anyway, so that is what the Golem of Prague did. Now, for 6 days it would work, and on the Sabbath, the 7th day, Sunday, they would put the bandage back on, and it would basically shut down and rest. Well, what happened at one point is they forgot to put it back on, that bandage, and it did go on an essential rampage of sorts, and they couldn't stop it, and it did cause damage. So they are very, very one-in-one and an amazing inspirational and all. And how that golem really functioned is, so it kind of matches the, ancient stories, the civilization, the idea of whatever that needed to be done to make this a functioning golem. Now, outside of that, it may also be based on the Statue of Liberty due to the rusting coloration, copper oxidization, more than anything, actually is a more apt way of actually describing it, as it'll go from a bronze-ish copper color to the jade greens, which is what Golurk looks like and Golett looks like after living for thousands of years. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe they didn't look very brassy, coppery, whatever, but it's a possibility, and if there is a mega version, it would be pretty freaking cool to see that it has, you know, maybe the spiritual energy expands from its body, or all the oxidization gets kind of removed and you see the true color beneath. The last thing it could be based off of is the terracotta army, of course, as it is basically a soldier. It's made out of terracotta clay, so on and so forth. Opinions on this Pokemon? Now, I don't think it's a ghost. It is fueled by whatever energy it is, and whatever abilities that it has. You know, it can do all these different things, right? You can list them off, and I'm not going to, as many ghosts or other ghosts can do. What makes it very interesting, if you wanted to push the it is a ghost theory to it, instead of it being a ghost type, you could throw out the idea that maybe it's not perpetual energy, but instead it is fueled by the spirits of those that have passed. Them passing as they had people pass away, maybe they pushed that energy or life into this golem that they created, giving them quote-unquote eternal life. And by combining spirits, they were able to make a stronger one that was still subservient to others, wanting to do good, creating Golurk. Really think it's a great mon. I even have an emote of it now. Absolutely love it. Thank you, Archimeflos. Go follow her on Twitter. Honedge, the living dead Zord with a blue-eyed gem at its center, said to be its true form. I mean, kind of makes sense if it's its eyeball. But it's also said to have been born from a person's soul after they were killed by the sword it now resides in. That's kind of messed up, honestly. Imagine, I wish I would get, no, okay, I'm not going to say I wish, do not do this. But if I were to be somehow killed by a scythe, it would be kind of sick to inhabit the scythe. Now, with its prehensile sash, the sash that it can freely move around, it can control, it holds its own sheath when battling, or even wraps it around opponents to steal life energy if you dare grab its hilt. Since it starts off as an ordinary sword, it could be based on Bushido mythos behind katana use. Katanas possessed the user's samurai's soul and attacked of its own free will. In addition, in Japanese legends, an object left behind or forgotten by its owner can and will become a Tsukumogami if it's left long enough. Typically, this is more common for swords and umbrellas, but yes, it's also similar to Banette, but that's a whole different thing as we previously discussed. There's also the Tyrfing of Norse mythology. Looking at the Tyrfing story, though, there's a lot of like, oh, it is used to fell others in battle. Basically, you were guaranteed to win your fight, but it comes at a cost. There's a lot of details there that you could try and pick and choose that could pull into Honedge, and I do have the link to the general story below, so that way you can see a good chunk of it yourself and see that, yeah, it kind of fits. Now, this sword is also, or the sword itself that Honedge possesses, I suppose, is very similar to many others, but closely resembles the double-edged straight sword used in China, the Jian, which, being a double-edged straight sword, is pretty funny, making sense that if you use this sword, sure, you're going to be able to crack down your enemies, no problem, but it's going to steal your soul. Double-edged sword, as the metaphor. In addition to it having the triquetra symbolism here and on its, hilt and everything, along its evolutions as well. It represents the simplest possible knot, the triquetra, but also represents Trinity in many religions. Even its name, Hitotsuki, may be seen as a combination for Hitotsu, one, Tsuki, stab, lunge, or thrust, or the other translation of Tsuki, spirit possession, which that comes in very handy as we move along to evolutions and the possible influence they had on society. Doublade, now composed of two swords, possibly tainted in blood as that blue sash is now turning a more like pinkish purple. It excels in defensive and offensive strategies. The two swords are separate and communicate telepathically. This allows it to complete complex tasks and makes it unstoppable even to the most skillful swordsman. Ugh. The metallic sound it creates by scraping against each other unnerves its opponents, and they've basically gone from this blade to a coat of arms. And let's up those defensive abilities once more as we jump into Aegislash, whatever. I call it Aegislash, deal with it. A single blade once more, but now fit with a shield as it switches between offensive and defensive styles with shield and blade form. It possesses incredible spectral powers that enables it to manipulate people and Pokemon alike, almost like a possession as alluded by Honedge. It can detect the innate qualities of leadership, and legends say it recognizes worthy leaders destined to become kings, attending and serving generations of kings for that matter, though it was also rumored that they drained the life of one king and the kingdom fell alongside him. Through the combination of its steel body and spectral power, it can reduce the power of any attack upon it and retaliate with its own body as a powerful weapon. With basis in mythical swords such as Durandal and Excalibur, this Pokemon is genuinely, in my opinion, phenomenal. Its name also alludes to Zeus's shield, Aegis, and Aegis is also known as the protection, backing, or support of a particular person or organization. In Japanese, it is known as Gillard, potentially being a combination of Gilgamesh, who is believed to be a real Sumerian king, Gild, to cover in a layer of gold, and Kiru, to slay with a blade, kill, or guard. Honestly, phenomenal once again. I love this line. Looking into my opinions of it, it is very clearly a ghost. It states that it possesses a sword. It is a spirit that died by it and now possesses it. Very clearly a ghost. In addition, I would dare suspect that Aegislash has always been one of those Pokemon that it always possesses whoever grabs it and is stealing their life force. Maybe it keeps the kings alive longer. Think about what this could have influenced in the world of Pokemon. What kings may have been using Aegislash and being controlled by it, being its puppet, causing different national relations to change over centuries because of this Pokemon. Crazy, genuinely insane to think that this Pokemon, let alone you don't know how many others, influenced human history, and we don't even know it. Let's talk about the unalive child in the room, Phantump. The spirit of a child who became lost in the forest, reborn as its spirit possesses a tree stump. Its cries sound like the voice of a child or eerie screams. And as much as it's only trying to make friends, people end up becoming lost as they try to follow that voice. It is believed a cure-all can be created by infusing its leaves, though at the same time, the second you pluck those leaves off, they just wow, that was pathetic. Wither instantly. Though, that is also only a legend, ultimately, so God knows if you can actually create that cure-all. It's likely based on the stump of a Kodama, the spirits of trees that sometimes inhabit old-aged trees. And it's also similar to other nature spirits, such as dryads, which really comes in handy when we talk about its evolution. Its shiny coloration is similar to the birch tree, known for gray and white bark, and now its leaves representing a tree in autumn. Now, let's wander a little bit deeper into this forest and talk about Trevenant. Gnarled branches forming horns, legs similar to the venom of a spider, its body taking on an intimidating appearance. And now it controls all the other trees using its roots as a nervous system. So you're not being able to get sneaking through the forest. It knows you're there upon the first step. Though, despite that, it's not malevolent. It will only try to trap you in the forest and curse you if you try to do any harm to its home by cutting down the trees. It's very kind to forest-dwelling creatures and the Pokemon that even reside within its body. It despises Fire-type Pokemon, as such Lumberjacks will bring in Fire types to use them against Trevenant. Who would have guessed? It's a Ghost type, and, it can't really, or not Ghost type, it's a Grass type, and Fire's good against that, so duh. And it is the only Pokemon capable of using Forest's Curse, turning the opponent into a Grass type, which is terrifying because that basically means that it's not creating more Phantump, assumedly, but there is the chance that at some point in the future, we are going to get a Pokemon that is created by Trevenant's cursing. Its body pattern is similar to Shimenawa, used to mark spiritual habitation, and are seen tied around Kodama. its fierce protection of forests may be representative of a specific dryad known as Hamadryad. Could also be related to the general protection of sacred groves, cyclops, and even its body shape. If you look at its overall body shape, putting it into a silhouette, it is similar to the kanji that means wood or tree. Finally, the potential inspiration behind it could be related in Ents, the living trees and guardians of forests. Phantump into Trevenant is really cool. I love the idea that it is very much a ghost. It is absolutely a ghost, not just a ghost type Pokemon. It does live on, now protecting the home that it was lost in and protecting others from a similar fate, even though sometimes it causes that similar fates probably because of the Phantump attracting others and getting them lost. That is an inadvertent, accidental mistake, and Trevenant as a Pokemon, while being very intimidating, I love that it is the complete counter of that, and is actually a force of good. Let's move on to one that is absolutely not a force of good, and it terrifies me because it's sitting right there behind me. Pumpkaboo. It and its evolution come in 4 sizes, which specialize in your personal preferences and its own for that matter. Small, average, large, and super. Now, this little jack-o'-lantern actually encases its lower body in a pumpkin and isn't necessarily the pumpkin itself. It's actually the shadowy body that pokes cutely out on top, kind of like a cat. When it gets dark outside, it actually guides the way for travelers through beams of light from its chest, which kind of like little nipple blinker lights. They are said to carry wandering spirits into the afterlife after storing their spirits inside of them, kind of like Dusknoir did. But the size of the pumpkin is rumored to denote the number of spirits lingering in the area when it was created. And the super size apparently are very partial to spirits of those who were similarly superior proportioned. I don't know if that means like they were larger people or bigger people in general. Maybe there was like a 7-foot tall, super muscly dude, and the super sized one only wants those people. I don't know. However, its own spirit is also trapped in this world. It can hypnotize and control any humans or Pokemon using those same lights, which, honestly, you can say all you want. Oh, it's guiding people. Oh, it's guiding spirits. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And very much like Litwick, it's probably actually just hypnotizing us into believing what it wants us to and then taking us away to the spirit world. And, you know, its name, Bakecha, may be a combination of Obake, meaning a ghost, and Kabocha for pumpkin. And I'm going to support the idea that it is just hypnotizing us for what it wants and abducting us, basically, with its evolution, Gourgeist. Gourgeist, the gourd that can retract to look exactly like a traditional jack-o'-lantern. It wanders on nights of the new moon, up and down streets, singing an eerie song, and anyone who hears it will be cursed. Adding to the terror, it also sings that joyfully, observing the suffering of its prey entangled in its arms as it does so. And now, its 4 different sizes determines who they want to take to the afterlife. Small ones preferring to target adults by pretending to be children. The large one prefers taking children by pretending to be adults, and the supersized ones aren't picky and just target everybody. So just don't answer the door, as its signature move is Trick or Treat, and it will just take you away as it's here for nothing but tricks. Its inspiration can come from, you know, looking more like a candle on top as it drips wax down, and it might also have potential connections to Yotsuya Kaidan, a story where a woman transforms into a paper lantern yokai with long hair. Gourgeist and Pumpkaboo, don't really care for Gourgeist as much. I think it's relatively cool. Pumpkaboo is absolutely adorable, and it very clearly states that it is a lost, wandering spirit, now basically possessing a pumpkin, using that as its opportunity to take more souls to the afterlife, doing whatever it wants with it. God knows what. I keep saying that, but afterlife? Question mark? I don't know. Let's move on to a big boy, Hoopa Confined. A shred of what is only a minute fraction of the true unbound Hoopa, having its boundless and monstrous energy bound and sealed within the prison bottle. It takes on the smaller Jin form. That bottle is very much like a lamp. Being unsealed will grant Hoopa its power once more, but that power may be incredibly evil, causing as much destruction as possible for 3 days. Almost like a genie and its 3 wishes. While there isn't a lot of information for our confined Hoopa, we do get a nice little scary story to tell from the clerk that gives the bottle to you in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. And of course, I have to do a sort of voice for our clerk.
Hey, do you have a minute for this story? This is something that happened to me while I was watching the store one time. It was like a totally dark night, moonless, and I was like, no way, this is so creepy. Then suddenly, whoosh, out of nowhere, the automatic sliding door, it slides open. And then this super duper scary old guy comes in, kinda unsteady, you know, kinda shambling. So I'm thinking how terrible and scary this is. And then the old guy shuffles over to me. Hey, he has a package like clutched in his hands. He's mumbling that he has to show it to me. And then he asks, do you know what this is worth? He keeps staring right at me and not even blinking. I was so freaked out. I was like, yeah, it's really something, isn't it? So the old guy grins at me, and then he says, I'll just give you this instead of money. Now give me everything you've got in the store. That's what he said, really. I was like, what is this? Too weird, my dude. And I was scared, so I started shoveling over, potions and like whatever I could, reach. I gave the dude everything for this stupid package, and out he goes, like with a wicked grin on his face. As he's walking out, he says, 3 days. For a mere 3 days will Hoopa be unbound. Really? I was like, stop freaking me out with this nonsense, bro. I was like sweating. The back of my shirt was soaked. Anyway, nothing I could do. So I opened the package and it's just a dirty old bottle. Like, really? So I go, weirdness, wonder what's in it. I'll grab the stopper and carefully pull it loose. Blah! It popped open, but there was nothing inside. So I figure I got totally fooled. Thanks for listening to my story, little bro. You know what? I'm gonna give you the bottle from that night because you're so nice. It's not doing me any good, really. Sometimes I wonder if it really is only a dirty old bottle. Those last words that old guy said as he left, for a mere 3 days will Hoopa be unbound, just can't seem to get out of my head.
I do voice commissions. I have a lot of voices. Check out my business email. $5 for a minute. Doesn't matter what it is. Nothing lewd, so don't get crazy with it. And $20 for 1,000 words. Make it good quality. Anywho, Hoopa Unbound. Pretty snazzy Pokemon. Gotta love it. Hoopa Bound. Pretty cool. I like it. It's cute. I don't know. There's not a lot of information on it, like I said. Hoopa Unbound has way more to it, but I'm not talking about Unbound here because Unbound is a Psychic Dark type, whereas Hoopa Confined, whatever, is Psychic Ghost. Just because it's a legendary, I'm just gonna give it the, seal of you are what you say you are, and let it be a ghost, like an actual ghost, not just a ghost type. Other than that, let's move on to another Pokemon. See you later, dude! Oh god, don't do that. Decidueye. Are Pueo, Owl, Robin Hood, and the flesh, feathers, whatever you really want to call it, I guess. There's flesh underneath the feathers. Either way, it's cool and cautious by nature, and it begins to panic if it's surprised, hiding from opponents by masking its presence, allowing it to attack unaware foes, even being able to use Spirit Shackle to tie down that spirit and strike true, all while using its feathers and body as arrows and a bow. Their accuracy allows them to fire at and pierce a pebble from over 100 yards. Mind you, in the Olympics, they fire up to 70 meters for a recurve bow, kind of like how Hawkeye is depicted using. It shares similarities with Amakua, oh goodness, ancestral spirits in Hawaiian culture, alongside other owls such as the common barn owl, which is also known as the ghost owl. Puns galore. And of course, the extinct stilt owl, which actually ties the ghost typing together with its nomadic Hisuian form. The Hisuian form was far more quick to act, fighting in close combat, being brash, not thinking, very edge of its seat acting. And due to that overall nature and lifestyle, that species went extinct, making it want to step away from that sort of combat in order to thrive, survive, and actually still live as a species of sorts, ultimately creating a different species of Decidueye. I do talk about this a lot more in my explaining every regional form video, which honestly is the actual first video I've ever made that was in this style, so bear with me if you ever watch it. It is a bit rougher around the edges, but has some decent info, and I mean, we're about to have Legend ZA come out, so maybe I'll just make an updated version of it. As far as Decidueye goes, though, there's a Rowlet behind me, tucked away right there for a reason. I love the line. I mean, its middle form is a little awkward, but not the worst in terms of them all. And it's not really a ghost, it's just representative. It is very stealthy, it likes to hide away, it can use spiritual attacks, so it's very fitting in terms of it being a ghost type and representative of an extinct species, but it itself, I would dare say, is not an actual ghost. Senzu style Oricorio, changed by the color and makeup of the nectar that they drank. The dancing Oricorio actually have 4 different forms, each being the only user of Revelation Dance. Not Relevation. Gosh, you switch 2 letters around and you get something completely different. A special move that changes type according to Oricorio's dancing style. Calm and collected, Senzu style Oricorio is heavily resembling Geisha. Geisha? Gosh, I'm just gonna have to insert like Google stuff all over the place. It draws in spirits with their dancing and borrows their power to fight, sending their opponent's mind and hearts to another world through their curse. The dance reminds people who migrated from Kanto of their homeland, and is popular with adults in Paldea. They are likely inspired by Hawaiian honey creepers native to Hawaii. Their beaks are specialized towards the flower that they feed from the most, and of course, the mating dances of birds in general. Senzu also is the word for a folding fan, as they are used in those types of dances. Opinions on this one? Not a ghost Pokemon. It is a ghost type, but it's not an actual ghost. It just, once again, borrows the power of the spirits, controlling them and allowing them to be used to battle, to fight, to dance, whatever it might be, as they borrow their power. It is a very cool Pokemon that I overlook very often, didn't think much of it, but the more you look into the Oricorios and the Tapus in relation, I'd say, the cooler they actually become in terms of their abilities and their background. Let's take a tangent for a moment, as I do also enjoy, and this is obviously still part of my opinion, but I do also enjoy the fact that it follows the line of these honey creepers and hummingbirds, where you do get a lot of birds that have adapted in a certain way to meet their environments. And I vaguely remember, if anybody knows it a little bit better, vaguely remember watching a documentary, and there's probably multiple out there, where it showed like 100 different types of beautiful, stunning hummingbirds that they were adapted over the years, over centuries really, I guess, you know, to specifically feed on certain flowers, because they need to keep feeding in order to live. Otherwise, it's lights out for these hummingbirds because of the amount of energy that they need every single day and how much they have to consume. So in order to ensure that they survive, they specialize towards certain flowers, some of them having long beaks, so that way they can really reach into the very long flowers, some of them being short, stubby beaks, that way you can dip into the short flowers. They adapted so that way they have less competition between each other, and so that way they could thrive. And where they put their nests is phenomenal, above rivers and everything, so that way predators don't attack them. It is beautiful. I want to watch more nature documentaries in the future. It's just, you know, a nice little thing that I should spend some more time doing. Sandygast. Inhabiting beaches, this Pokemon is born from grudges that seep into the sand after being playfully built by a child. Such as from Pokemon that suffered defeat in battle or even just the deceased in general. It can suck the life force of others through its mouth, and in the Alola region, there is a contest of courage between children for you to put your hand into its mouth. Though anyone who does this or touches the shovel on its head will fall under its control, being forced to add sand to its body in order to make it larger. It does care a lot for that shovel, and will only replace it momentarily if ever lost. These are its main method of growth, as it is rather slow in movement, and can't really catch up to Pokemon that can often just move faster and get away. Alternatively, to try and even the playing field, it may also try to fling sand into its prey's eyes to try and give itself a better chance in general. As we slide on over to Palossand, from mound to castle, Palossand has the power to control sand, with each grain having a will of its own. It curses and controls people and Pokemon to gather sand for its body, though if it really wants to, it can just replenish sand on its own. When searching for prey, the shovel seems to rotate and move around, possibly working as a radar of sorts, and it is referred to as the beach nightmare. It hates water and can't maintain its form during heavy rainfall. It, terrifyingly enough, can grow to be the size of a full building and also whip up sandstorms with its massive arms at will. And any creature that it can capture is dragged into the sand where its vitality is drained. With no escape, only dried up bones are left behind, which are fired as ammunition. It is implied, though, that it can't drain the life force of humans, which I don't believe. And ultimately, traces of these victims' ill will are left behind by it, which in turn form new Sandygast. This last part there makes it very clear to me that they are in some capacity true ghosts. Vengeful spirits come back to cause harm to others as harm was caused to it in a form of just pure emotional revenge. Its shiny is also pretty freaking snazzy. Black sand, metallic sand looking stuff, you know, pretty great in my personal opinion. And as a Pokemon overall, if I had noticed it earlier when I was playing the games, another Pokemon I would have copped immediately and added to my team. It's cool. It's great. I love scary mansion, sandcastle, ghost monster thing. How could you not? Up next is actually one of my absolute favorites, if not arguably my favorite fairy-type Pokemon. If you probably don't count Togekiss, and I put Togekiss as my favorite flying type. Mimikyu. This lonely lad, clad in a self-made disguise of Pikachu, desperately seeks attention and love. Its purple eyes are the only confirmed part of its body outside of the, foot and shadowy claws that extend from under its cloak. If that disguise is damaged, it becomes incredibly upset and will try to seek revenge, doing everything it can to try and kill or harm, at least really aiming towards killing, the one that damaged its cloak at risk of its own life. This is actually due to a number of reasons, one being that it truly just wishes to be loved, and believes mimicking Pikachu, who is incredibly loved and popular in general, will bring it love. It also wants to keep its own identity safe and secret, as glimpsing at its true form can cause incredible illness and death, which in turn would only increase the amount of fear behind it, which would just make it loved less, going against what it really wants. And it's overall very difficult for Mimikyu to actually make this cloak, and as such, when repairing the damage caused to it, it cries to itself, swearing to never forgive the one that hurt it. It likely takes inspiration from Boogle from the Breton myth, and possibly Lovecraftian monsters. For Boogle it is very much a creature that is known to be very ugly and cries to itself often, keeping itself in dark, secluded places so that nobody may glimpse its form and grow ill, sick, whatever you might state. As for Lovecraftian monsters, gazing upon their form causes madness within the brain of man. That is the idea behind many of them, as we cannot fully comprehend them, and glimpsing upon them gives us basically the true darkness that exists in this world that we are not privy to and ignorant of. I've already said it. Mimikyu is adorable. I love it so much. I love all the art that exists of Mimikyu, with all the different cloaks of different Pokemon that it might try to mimic. I have a Mimikyu plush right behind me here, right behind the Magikarp there. It is cute. I love Mimikyu. One of the, honestly, one of my absolute favorites, I would dare even argue. And hopefully we can see, well, I guess we don't want to see what's underneath, but hopefully we can get a little bit more story behind Mimikyu one day, really expand on it, and maybe even just see what other creatures could be in a similar manner to this lovely Pokemon. Also, personally speaking, there's a lot of Pokemon I like more than Pikachu, and I know that's the case for a lot of other people, even though Pikachu is the mascot of the Pokemon franchise. Like, I love Gengar. Gengar's my favorite. Gengar is also, like, I don't know, it's one of the most popular out there, of course, amongst so many others. So, it makes sense for Mimikyu to have different costumes overall. Even being, I would love to see different costumes for it, depending on, like, future regions that it might be in, but that's probably something that'll never really happen. Let's actually move on now. Dumb eyes, don't look wrongly at the anchor, for your true fear should be directed towards the seaweed on this thing. That's the real Pokemon, and it is massive, nearly 13 feet on average. The soulless seaweed adrift in the waves, merged with debris of a sunken ship, then being reborn as a Pokemon. It maintains itself with new infusions of seabed detritus and other seaweed. While the main body might only be those 13 feet, the seaweed can stretch for hundreds of yards. Hundreds. Meaning you are never truly safe. Unless you're Skrelp and Dragalge, which uses seaweed in general as its home, and they just seem to get along really well. It also prefers very large prey, such as Whale Mur and Whale Lord, knocking them out with a single blow. I can't imagine just a metal pipe sound that just rings out through the water with that. After knocking it out, it envelops them in its seaweed and drains away their life. Inspirations for Dhelmise may draw upon various ghost ship legends, such as the Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship cursed to eternally sail the seas. Its behavior can also be related to two famous captains in classic literature, Captain Ahab, who dies tied to his own harpoon on his obsession-led journey to hunt a whale, and then the captain of Demeter in Bram Stoker's Dracula, who is found tied to the helm of the ship. In addition, we have Codium fragile, dead man's fingers, in other words, a type of seaweed, and there are also stories of seaweed monsters in William Hope Hodgson's Sargasso Sea Stories. So lots of different, like, ideas and cultures in terms of, like, literature that came together to potentially inspire this living dead seaweed monster. And in terms of being a ghost, considering it's probably possessed by those that died at the bottom of the sea, I would dare say that this is an actual ghost. And it's trying to maintain its form as best as it can as it continues to eternally decay, only being able to feed on others' life force while also grabbing, again, as it stated, other detritus, decaying materials, so on and so forth, to rebuild itself. It's like a living zombie that is intelligent enough to put body parts back on. Now, in terms of everything else, I didn't think much of Dhelmise. I was like, oh, that's a cool design, and I moved on with my life. I kind of saw it in the same sense as the dragon, whatever, I'm showing it on screen, and you don't need to tell me the name. It's right there. I found it. Trust me, I found it. Now, Drampa. There it is. I said it out loud. Anywho. But the more I looked into Dhelmise, the more I was terrified by it. The more I found out, the more I realized how scary a Pokemon like this exists. It's very similar to Tentacruel, where it's like, that's allowed to live, you allow this thing to exist in our world, there's no taming that. You can try all you want, but you're better off just going nowhere near the water, which makes it incredibly cool in my mind. I love the horror aspect of it. So, you're doing great, Plants Ghost. Lunala. Now, I did have to look back at my own shorts to help me get this info easier instead of having to read paragraph upon paragraph upon paragraph of information all over again when I've done it before. And one day I will cover the legendaries in far more detail, as I keep saying, and the relations between them, who created who, and looking at the tree of legendaries and all that stuff. Wow, these are really, really short sleeves. Like, I could flex and just rip this if I wanted to. But allow me to see if I have what it takes. Now, I used to do, again, I've talked about it before. You've seen the shorts in these videos because it makes it easier in some capacity, where I have done rating people's favorite Pokemon, which I don't do anymore, but it's a smaller version of what I do here. And let's see if I have what it takes. For those of you that are fast talking is a lot for you, just be prepared. Lunala, known as the beast that calls the moon, this Pokemon has a slew of concepts it's based on, from the Sundog to bats such as the Hawaiian Horibat, the Heroes Papalato, Kamazaz, Lutoki, and Pea Makawalu, who is goddess of the night, receiver of the dead, and reason why the sky turns red, similar to how Lunala's shiny does, which that shiny could also be related on how the sun looks during a total lunar eclipse. Being an emissary of the moon, it absorbs light, converting it to energy, and commands light obscuring darkness that protects it from harm. It can also open ultra wormholes, create Cosmog, and Z crystals. When it enters its full moon phase, it takes the shape of the moon with its wings and strikes with Moongeist Beam or Menacing Moonrays Maelstrom, which will always strike true. I didn't think that moonburns were real. Though, since it is composed of light, it is constantly hunted down by Necrozma, who just wants to end its pain through becoming whole again. Whew. That feels good. I still got it. It took me 2 tries. It took me 3 tries, actually. You didn't see that. But, to slow down again, ultimately, stepping away from Lunala and looking at Dawnwing's Necrozma, who is fused with Lunala, there really isn't much of a difference outside of there being a visual difference, and Lunala just doesn't have control as Necrozma just takes over from it, or takes it over, seeking to just burn the world with lasers and consume even more light so it can reach its true form. Will I ever do those fast-paced stuff ever again? Probably not. It takes a lot of effort, and you can just kind of see the animation here. Imagine me. I made over 100 of those shorts, and I moved around like a ton, and nobody ever saw that. So I was like, I'm not going to step in front of a camera. I'm not confident enough in these looks. I am now, and I feel comfortable with myself. But opinions on Lunala, I love it. Oh, Lunala is so cool. I love the Cosmog line in general. I think it's one of the most perfect Pokemon out there, in my personal opinion. In addition, it is not an actual ghost. It is simply just a ghost type. It goes back to the goddess of the night, receiver of the dead, and especially boils together when you get like the blood moon, the reason why the sky turns red being, Pea Makawalu. Oh, and all goes back to everything, going back to just Hawaiian, Samoan stories and myth and everything. It's insane. I have a bit of a soft spot for it all, and I think that basically derived from just watching Lilo and Stitch as a kid. So, Lunala is phenomenal. For those of you that weren't ready for the incredibly fast talking, sorry. At least everything's leveled. Moving forward, Marshadow. Another one that I actually did make a short out of, but I'm not going to talk super fast, but I am going to just shoot on through what I said in that short here and talk about it. Now, this Pokemon is based on shadowboxing and night marchers from Hawaiian myth, and it slinks into the shadows of others in order to understand their feelings and actually copy their abilities all in one. No matter the person and no matter the technique, Marshadow can learn it all and make even the most ultimate techniques even more powerful. Set with 2 signature moves, Spectral Thief, which can steal power, but then it has its Zenith form, where Marshadow unleashes the pinnacle of its power, the true height of it all, with their Z move 7-Star Strike, which ultimately that move, it's a Z move, so of course it never misses, but it is the true maximum of its power. Now, in talking about it all in the shorts, I did fail to actually mention Menehune of Hawaiian tradition. Might be Menehune. I'm not an expert in linguistics. But the Night Marcher part of it all also deserves a little bit more detail, in my opinion. Like, way more detail, because this gets really interesting. Because the Night Marchers worshipped a number of gods, but in regards to Pokemon, I find it important to start with the fact that they marched from darkness after sunset and ended their march just before sunrise, making Marshadow tied to both Solgaleo and Ho'o. The gods the Night Marchers themselves worshipped included Cain, who represented procreation, Ku, of war, politics, farming, and fishing, Lono, of fertility, agriculture, rainfall, music, and peace, and Kanaloa of the underworld. Now, this puts out a slew of potential implications, because this means that Marshadow could worship tons of different Pokemon, but the question is, which ones would it actually know about? Is it just, is it stuck to Alola, and maybe it only knows ones that flew over, or are like, maybe it read on it, maybe it's from a different land, and now it's here? We don't know. And I've been told that the movies, and from what I could tell, the movies don't really do much to really tell a lot more about it like it deserves. Ultimately, though, Giratina isn't really representative of the underworld, despite what people like to think. So we don't have the underworld, represented by Pokemon yet. We might have Lono represented through some capacity of Meloetta and the Genie Quartet. And we don't have a Pokemon representing war, or politics, or fishing, technically. I guess you could technically say the Swords of Justice are, war, but they're not. They're justice. They are the Swords of Justice. Sure, they took part in a civil war between Pokemon and people, but they're not the war Pokemon. And neither are Reshiram and Zekrom. I guess you could state it that way, through politics or whatever else it might be, whatever reasoning you might be able to justify, but they ultimately aren't. Cain can also be represented through Ho-Oh in Rebirth, as it represents feminine, sky, and flames. It kind of fits Ho-Oh quite a bit, but there are still massive opportunities here to explore Marshadow and other potential legendary Pokemon. So I hope with pretty much every part of my being that if we ever get a Legends game based on Alola, it explores Marshadow and the Tapus in their defense of Alola from Ultra Space. I'd probably just argue that we need an entirely different game specifically for Ultra Space itself even. In the end, Marshadow is an incredible little guy. He's very fun, solid design, and feels like a slightly missed opportunity that might be expanded on in the future. Maybe they were leaving themselves open for the future of Legends games, of leaving mystery out there. There's so much to explore here, and I hope that I am here as time goes on to explore and see that happen. Speaking of Ultra Space, though, let's talk about Blacephalon, codename UB Burst. Colorful, very clowny, and fit with eyes on the sides of its head. Its head is not even attached to its body and can be used as a weapon when removed. The sparks it emits from its body and their shape tell the mood of Blacephalon, and it is known to trick targets through the silly way it walks before blowing its head up without warning. This shocks the victim for long enough for Blacephalon to take action and steal their vitality to use for its own energy. But don't worry, it regenerates its head with ease. It also stores that same energy possessed by totem Pokemon within its body, the Z power itself. It also has a rivalry for who can shine the brightest with Xurkitree. The homeworld of Blacephalon is unseen and unknown currently. It may also take some inspiration from the yokai Nukikubi and from Dullahan of Celtic myth. Headless. Kind of makes sense, I think Blacephalon was goofy and fun and cool, and then its special move is really stupid, doing such an incredible amount of damage, and basically ending its own self in the process, while being just this underhandedly destructive Pokemon if it really wants to be, or at least very deadly Pokemon. I'm amazed that it doesn't have some sort of dark typing attached to it because of it being so inadvertently underhanded. Could have just been another Ghost Dark type, but I respect it for what it is, and it's a pretty cool mon. Sinistea, with a phony form and the true antique unique form, we have a deadly teacup possessed by the Poltergeist Sinistea itself. It is said to be created when it actually possesses a cold leftover cup of tea. Take that, Europeans. You think your tea is so special. All it takes is for you to stir the tea that it's in, and as the swirl disappears, Sinistea gets weakened and dizzy, almost as if it's some sort of mold that needs to be broken up a bit. In return, though, it can absorb the life force of anyone who drinks it, and it tries to wait patiently, but since it tastes so terrible, most people spit it out before they can actually truly swallow it, causing it to miss its opportunity. And to make things easy now, it is stated that while similar to Poltchageist, they are unrelated. And of course, some people will actively go to great pains to prepare the perfect tea and teacup, let it sit, get moldy, and eagerly await for Sinistea to come and possess their selections. Just imagine all of that moldy tea just wasted and left out. Leave it out a little bit longer and it evolves into Polteageist. Not really how it works, but, you know, bear with me here. Made of black tea and inhabiting a full kettle now, it even tastes distinctly delicious, but can cause strong chills when swallowed. This may lead to indigestion, stomach aches, and even death if drunk in excess. Only its trainer is allowed to drink its tea. And there are gourmets who drink Polteageist tea every day, showing no fear of the side effects. Though if you are an enemy, it will try to shoot its tea into your mouth to get you to try and drink some forcefully. They live in hotels and restaurants, disguising themselves as tableware and infecting leftover tea to create more of their own kind. So, it kind of has an unknown gender, and I'm just gonna say it's asexual reproduction because, I mean, duh. Apparently its personality also is completely derived from the type of tea, like solely, that is left out. It may also be based on the yokai Morinji no Akoma or Narigama, which both take the form of possessed kettles. I think Sinistea is cute. I mean, it's almost, like, obvious that it's supposed to be a ghost of sorts. I feel, actually, despite, you know, and if I sound wishy-washy with some of these, oh well. But with this one, it goes back or forth. I mean, you could say it is just possessing the moldy tea. You could say the moldy tea now has life, and it's more the fact that it is a mold than anything, not an actual ghost. But go either way, I'm gonna lean towards the idea that it's not an actual... I mean, it kind of has to be because it floats around, but I'm gonna say... Fudge. See, now this is what happens. I'm gonna say, based on its abilities and how easily you can stir it and make it kind of disappear, that I think this is not a true ghost. I completely understand if you would argue that it is. But outside of that, cute Pokemon, lovely ideas behind it. That's all. I don't know. I feel like I made that very awkward. This section is very awkward feeling. Dreepy, resembling a reptile or amphibian of sorts. Salamander reborn ghosts of a prehistoric species that once lived in ancient seas. It generally retains the same behaviors it had when it was alive, as it tends to wander locations where it once lived, as well as biting at Clauncher as if to eat them, but it doesn't. It doesn't consume them at all. Dreepy are exceptionally weak in combat, so much so that on its own, a mere child could actually defeat it. However, it has the potential to become much stronger and evolve if it has friends to help it train. The true treasure, the whole time, the friendships we made along the way. In the evening, groups of Dreepy fly at high speeds across the seas, poking at other Pokemon underwater for fun. I will gush about this Pokemon line and its inspirations after I get through them all, because I love it. That was spooky. I don't know. Talking about ghost Pokemon, and I hear a freaking spooky sound. That was terrifying. If I die, upload this video still. Somebody edit it. This is not an act. Anywho, Drycloak. capable of flying at high speeds greater than 120 miles per hour or 200 kilometers per hour. It carries Dreepy on its head and is known as the Caretaker Pokemon. It fights alongside the Dreepy until the Dreepy evolve. And if it doesn't have a Dreepy to care for, it becomes very uneasy, trying to find any Pokemon to serve as a substitute. It attacks by firing energy blasts from its lungs, and if ever defeated in battle, it just simply wanders off, which is kind of funny. I love the idea that, you know, where most Pokemon faint, it just looks at you and it's like, almost like a Napstablook, look, where it's just like, oh no, I've been defeated, bye. Dragapult. Carrying a pair of Dreepy within its horns, it fires them at opponents. And those Dreepy love being used as personal heat-seeking missiles at immense speeds. They even immediately gather back to the Dragapult incredibly excited. It can even turn itself and the Dreepy invisible together. And because of this, their behaviors overall are kind of a mystery. And so, with those three complete, it's time for me to gush about them. And if you really want to hear a ton about fossil and prehistoric Pokemon and learn a ton about their real life inspirations, please go watch my video on the ancient history or the history of ancient Pokemon. I mean, I go like way back, bugs and all the way past the mammoths of modern age, right? But I love this little B2 Stealth Bomber Diplococcus Pokemon so freaking much. Boomerang had lovely Pokemon. It is an immense, perfect combination of all those little things slapped together in what I think is genuinely perfect, while also making it not like an absolute, like, oh, it has to be super, like, visually cool or super intimidating, but kind of cute in a way, and also still holding this, like, it's one of the few 3D Pokemon that I feel really have a ton of personality because of how it holds itself and how it moves. Its eyes, the story behind it and around it with Dreepy and Dracloak. I love it. Through and through. I should really get myself a plush of them. And they are definitively a ghost. Not just a ghost type. Spectrier. Fit with detached spectral hooves, this Pokemon leaves a trail of spectral mist as it moves. It desires isolation and silence, tending to be active during the night where its energy is heightened. Though because of this, it has weakened eyesight and focuses on its other 4 senses, developing them to be much sharper. If kicked by it, your soul can be separated from your body, and it can steal the life force of sleeping beings just kind of by being around them. Feeding on the ambient life force it steals from others, and will attack anyone who would try to disturb it. It is very proud and arrogant, only serving those it deems as the strongest. It once ruled over the Crown Tundra, lording over all of the Pokemon living there and terrorizing humans who dare intrude on its territory. At least until Calyrex tamed it with the Reins of Unity. It does have a fondness for carrots, as any horse really would, I suppose. More specifically though, the Shade Root carrots. And when it is fused with Calyrex, it does gain some new abilities. Now being able to run 1,000 miles in a single day, spectral powers increase further, allowing it to create Will-O-Wisps in countless numbers, or Will-O-the-Wisps. I'm very used to just saying Will-O-Wisps because of Pokemon or Will-O-Wisp. These wisps have the power to steal the opponent's life force with burning heat, and Calyrex can transform this steed's spectral aura into a black mass powerful enough to absorb the life force and souls of any being's energy, like a freaking spiritual black hole. Together with Glastrier, it can be seen to represent the Horsehead Nebula, a horse-shaped nebula near the constellation Orion, and funny enough, Calyrex itself could represent Orion, specifically its brightest star Rigel, or alternatively Lepus, the hare constellation located right below Orion. The story of taming and preventing these threats of these horses by the hand of Calyrex taming them also follows the same general story and tale of the Old English Black, an old extinct horse that is, in legend, said to have influenced the bloodline of the modern Shire, and Clydesdale horses. There are additional legendary horses such as Lamre from Celtic myth, which could explain the ability to steal life force from sleeping creatures, Dubsangland in Irish myth, or even water horses in Celtic and or even water horses in Celtic and Nordic folklore, more specifically Glaston in Manx folklore. And of course, potentially even the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Spectrier being or representing famine, which could absorb life force from living creatures, or the Ashen Horse of Death, since it has the ghost typing and follows the same general powers. The list goes on and on and on, honestly, and I was amazed and kind of overwhelmed by the potential avenues to go down, and this is, again, more of an overview, as eventually I will cover all legendaries in their own videos and their potential connections. Might have to actually cut that one into multiple parts and then release it into one massive video, because I really want to make sure I cover everything. Otherwise, Spectrier, it's a specter, it is a ghost. Very, very plainly put, it is a ghost horse. It is an actual ghost, not just a ghost type Pokemon. Doesn't make much of an impression on me. It's a pretty horse, I'll give it that. And you know what? Black and purple, purple's my favorite color. So, I'll give it that. Basculegion. After White Striped Basculin takes at least 294 damage total in recoil damage, this bad boy or girl gets its skull thickened to take blows just a little bit better. Well, at least that's what it seems like, and that's what I initially thought, when in reality, the evolution is achieved by a White Striped Basculin being possessed by the souls of other Basculin in its school who did not survive their harsh journey swimming upstream. In other words, I half imagine that these Basculin are butting heads over and over and over again and passing away, and then their souls just attached to the one that butt heads enough and survived. The souls now wrap around the body, particularly around the tail end, and the red on males is said to be caused by the soul's rage, meanwhile the pale blue on females is caused by sadness. When it senses danger, it will turn hostile and attack, along with the help of the souls that it has attached to it until the enemy is defeated. These souls are said to have a will of their own and provide Basculegion with the power needed to swim on without tiring. That'd be really nice, actually. Can you imagine a bunch of souls just attaching to you when you don't want to, do anything anymore, and they just lift you up, gone. That'd be nice. Yeah, just take me to the next state over. Why not? Males are known for their powerful jumps, while females can conjure and control terrifying illusions against its opponents. It's said to have no equal in the rivers of Hisui. In the modern age, it's honestly only found in Kitakami's Timeless Woods, along with its pre-evolved form. There's a lot that it could be based on, one of them being salmon, of course, or even Sakhalin Taimen, which is known as the phantom fish. Again, we get more puns. A large, endangered species that lives in rivers in Hokkaido. It also appears in Ainu folklore as a giant, powerful creature that could devour deer or boars, and it does also share some of the similarities with largemouth bass and other predatory fish such as the snakehead and the Goliath tigerfish. Its ghost type could be based on zombie salmon, which can happen when rapid physical deterioration occurs in salmon after spawning, but they continue to survive long-term as their bodies rot away. Basculegion's lower jaw and pectoral fins may also be inspired by its haumaki, wow, that's hard to say, an enlarged boat with side plates built by the Ainu people for seafaring and trading purposes. In real life, the Ainu created an extensive maritime network surrounding the Sea of Okhotsk, we're gonna go with that, with this vessel. This could also be inspired by Basculegion's role as the ride Pokemon on water in Hisui, of course. The amount of damage, 294, could represent Guruawase for Nikushi, the archaic Japanese word for hatred. I'm gonna be very honest with you. Yes, I mean, I could look through all this information, and I, briefly checked it. I'm like, okay, this lines up. This was, I know I read very verbatim as to what you could probably see on the Wikipedia, but it is, very, very nicely put together from that directly. Very cool seeing the background of it, Basculegion itself is not a ghost Pokemon, but rather has ghost, or the souls of those past attached to it, so you'll just say that those are, you know, the ghost, and Basculegion itself is not. I think the ties to the Ainu people are incredibly cool. I love seeing, you know, history or tradition of other cultures being represented appropriately through all this stuff, and it makes me curious to want to look into it. I think my first real look into Ainu in general, or the people, was actually Golden Kamui, which that's such a weeb thing to say, to be like, oh, my first interaction or my first understanding or idea or like exposure to a subset of people or a culture was through anime. And yeah, that is true. At the same time, it makes me want to look into things further, look into it, trying to find out what's real, what's not, and understand people in this world a little bit better, which is kind of why I like doing all of this. It makes it more interesting. So while I don't really care for Basculegion all that much, because I don't really care for Basculin, I respect the background and the ideas that could have inspired it, its creation, and just everything else surrounding it. Incredibly cool Pokemon in terms of that. Skeledirge and Dia de los Muertos! Or at least leaning more on like the Sugar Skulls as some level of inspiration for that Danny DeVito Chrome Dome that it's got going on. A perfect depiction fit with a cute little fiery bird that can be amplified through a fiery musical staff to send off a burning phoenix at its foes. It is said that the bird was born when the egg-shaped little fireball Skeledirge had as Crocolore on its head, kind of like in that nest, sombrero, was hatched. It was born and gained a soul, which also gave Skeledirge its ghost typing, meaning the bird is the ghost and not Skeledirge technically. It can sometimes be seen picking at Skeledirge's teeth, just as we would see in real life with Nile crocodiles and Egyptian plovers that help pick up parasites as a food source for the crocodiles, so that way they don't have parasites in their teeth, as they kind of have a peace treaty not to kill these birds. It sleeps with one eye open sometimes, and even when it is asleep and the sleep is shallow, it doesn't mind if the fiery bird on its head is moving about and playing pranks on it to try and get it to wake up or catch its attention in any way. Skeledirge itself is known to be very meddlesome, but has a very caring personality. Its singing is gentle, but powerful and full of vitality, full of life, capable of soothing souls of all who hear it. Opponents feel warm and fulfilled inside, just kind of losing their will to battle. But if you are a true enemy, it will burn you to a crisp by unleashing flames that exceed 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit or 3,000 degrees Celsius. You're scratching yourself. You hear that? That's my dog scratching herself. She's gonna be at this for a while. It has many, many, many different inspirations that we're gonna go through, such as calaveras, fake human skulls made for Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. These skulls are made from sugar, clay, or other edible or decorative stuff in general. And no, I personally never actually experienced Dia de los Muertos or celebrated it in general. I am Puerto Rican. I never grew up with this as a tradition. But it is beautiful nevertheless to me and my brain. Other inspirations include the Catalonia Cocoyona, the Lizard of Magdalena from Jaén, or Jacques de Nacoca, whose body can be found on display in Palma de Mallorca, from which Skeledirge's skeletal appearance may take inspiration from with its exposed skull. Cuca, I've got to brush up on my Spanish better, which is typically depicted as an alligator hag with long, messy hair in Brazilian culture, and as a crocodilian creature with a dome-shaped body in the Iberian Peninsula. Then we also have the fiery energy around its neck, resembling Mexican marigolds put on display to honor the dead, the colorful look in general being very reminiscent of Alebrije or Trencadis by Antoni Gaudi, I'm trying not to put a horrible accent on everything, but here I am. More specifically, El Drac, the dragon, located in Parc Güell, Barcelona. The ghost typing part of it all could be pulled from the Egyptian deity Sobek, or more specifically, I guess, Sobek Ra, in Hellenistic and Roman Egypt, and Horus or Ra in Sobek, both of them having bird heads. And lastly, if not the phoenix for our little bird, then the rooster or Barcelos, another folkloric bird said to have been resurrected after being roasted. I've already said it. Skeledirge itself is not a ghost. The phoenix bird, fiery little thing, being born from the fiery egg, becoming the phoenix, and then, slamming into the enemy and being reborn again, honestly, is the ghost. It is the spirit itself. As such, we have another Pokemon that is not an actual ghost, but instead controls or has assistance through the spirits themselves, and is able to do something with that. Now, I love Skeledirge and its line so much. There's so much fun inspiration. I love the design, and it looks a little goofy in its final form, but I think it comes together really nicely, just right. I think if it was like missing a piece or two that really made it what it is, then it wouldn't work. But I think honestly, if I can take a small tangent, all three of the Pokemon like starters are incredible in terms of like their inspiration and ideas behind them that made their designs what they are, or at least what could have potentially made them what they are based on our speculations. So, big appreciation for the starters of Gen 9. Ceruledge. Now, I again have another Pokemon here that I covered in heavy detail in my video, 10 Pokemon inspired by myths and their full stories. So I'm honestly just going to take that part and
Ceruledge and Alcantar de Miocid, the Ghost Knight wannabe Proto-Man itself. I love this Pokemon. But brief overview first, then into the myths. Black and purple armor filled with grudges and a flame from the eyes and the top of the head that burns out, alongside 2 swords for arms that can grow into full great swords. Fueled by fire and ghost energy, more specifically, the lingering regrets of the deceased. Merciless, willing to do anything to win, and stealer of life energy. Now, into the myth. Or rather, let's get into the real story and the myth, because there's something important to keep in mind here. There's the Kantar, and then there's the real story of El Cid. Just like many other stories, there's a real historical figure and a literary figure. So let's discuss both. El Cid, or rather, Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar El Cid Campeador, the Battler. Spanish medieval hero par excellence. Prominent member of the court of Castile during the short reign of Sancho II the Strong, from 1065 to 1072. Unfortunately, there was an accident on the frontier of Toledo that caused his exile in the year 1081. Now, they were in service of the Moorish king, and it's time for a tangent. Now, I have to admit, I thought Moor was inherently a very bad word, so I almost just didn't write it, didn't say it, didn't include it, so on and so forth. But considering that it was written on a site that I feel like I can trust, that is accounting for history, I wanted to look into it more. So I did a little bit extra research here, and here's the quick and clean info on it. I say quick as if I'm not going to talk about it for the next 5 whole minutes. Originally, this word wasn't rooted in racism. The understanding of how it became this way is as follows. Now I quote this from Madi Blaine, a Moroccan-Algerian candidate for a master's degree in anthropology and Middle Eastern studies at New York University, who had looked into this info and presented this. Blaine first presented his findings and ideas around Moorish depictions 2 years ago.
He said that at the time, he sought to offer a coherent narrative of the Moors and the imagery associated with their perceived identities. After deepening his understanding of the anthropological concepts and theories tied into the construction of race and power, he realized that the definition of Moors is intentionally vague and arbitrary. That's where racism gets its power. It's not supposed to be logical, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a rationality. Blaine identifies the rationale as privy to attempts to reconcile with otherness that inspires narratives used to uphold power. In other words, thank you, racism, for ruining yet another word, or bigots for that matter. I'm not afraid to say it here. I don't care. I'll stand on my soapbox for a couple of seconds. Ooh. Anywho, you know what? I'll even fight the people who decided that they wanted to ruin the word dank, because I would love... I left anyway. I couldn't hold it in. I would love to describe sewers as dank, dark, and wet like I should, but I can't say the word with a straight face. I laugh almost every single time. So, I mean, I'm just going off on that. But anywho, tangent's over. So the real Cantar de Mio Cid, or rather, the real Rodrigo Diaz, defended the territory against his brother and against the Count of Barcelona. Oh, I wrote defeated, and I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? It's defeated. I have a typo here. I'm keeping that in the video. He defeated them both, then was sent to the eastern coast to protect the interests of the Castile, and was exiled again by the king. Then he was just like, you know what, I'm done. I'm waging war on my own account, buddy. And he conquered Valencia in 1094, where he then passed away in 1099. Now, let's get into the Cantar de Mio Cid. This is the exaggeration of his tale, and let's just go over definitions real quick. I get ahead of myself. I apologize. I get excited because it's great and I'm happy. Well, I'm not apologizing for that. I take my apology back. A cantar is a poem consisting of 4-line stanzas, each line having 8 syllables. Now, this translates to the poem of the Cid, oldest Spanish poem preserved and takes place during the Spanish Reconquest. It tells the story of El Cid and his adventures during his exile. Now, the cantar does revolve around the restoration of lost honor multiple times. Basically, the idea is that he goes about what he's doing, he loses his honor, Zuko, it's just going through my head, and then reclaims his honor. But the new honor is much stronger, greater than the one that he had lost. And this happens again multiple times. So these I am going to quote directly once again for their synopses. The first song tells of the adventures of the hero in exile in the region of La Alcaria, I've stumbled on that, and the Jalón and Hiloca valleys, where he obtains his booty and taxes from the Muslim population. The second song focuses on the conquest of Valencia and the reconciliation between El Cid and King Alfonso, and ends with the wedding of his daughters to 2 noblemen from the royal court, the Dauphins of Carrion. The third song tells how the cowardice of the Dauphins leads to them being scorned by El Cid's men and their departure from Valencia with their wives, whom they mistreat and abandon in the oak forest of Corpes. El Cid brings a complaint before King Alfonso, who summons the court in Toledo, where the battler challenges the Dauphins. During the duel in Carrion, the Dauphins and their elder brother are disgraced, while the Princess of Navarre and Aragon ask for the hand of El Cid's daughters, and he finally sees them happily wed as they deserve. Next, we have the swords, Tizona y Colada, prize swords of the real Rodrigo Diaz, distinguished by the design on their hilts, or rather the design of their hilts in general, forged from Damascus steel, which I had to look into, and what I found, as per quoting, though there was a demand for Damascus steel, in the 19th century it stopped being made. This steel had been produced for 11 centuries, and in just about a generation, the means of its manufacture was entirely lost. The idea of using the Damascus steel meant that these swords, according to history, could be sharpened to their finest quality. And finally, you might be drawing some connections here or there between the myth and legend and Ceruledge, but allow me to explain to you, or at least give you a piece of information that might explain why Ceruledge is a ghost. The legend of El Cid is as follows. In the 1961 production of El Cid, featuring Charlton Heston, the wife of El Cid is depicted as strapping his body to his horse and sending it back into battle, fearing that his troops would become demoralized upon learning of his death. The soldiers, thinking that their leader was riding to fight beside them, rallied once more. The opposing army was so afraid of what looked to be an invincible fighter that they retreated to their boats. Thus, El Cid is said to have won his final battle, even after his death. Though, in fact, El Cid died peacefully at Valencia years after its conquest, being in June of 1094, his death being in 1099. The story of his being strapped to a horse after his death has some basis in other legends regarding his death and burial, which may be found in the Historia de Cardena. So I think that's, I think it's just cool. All right, let's just stop for a moment. I'm throwing a lot of information at you. Let's take a breath here, and let's just talk about how sick that is. Where he's just like, that is something that we see in so many different stories of a fallen soldier or general. Heck, I've seen it in Castlevania, and it's just that moment of dedication of, this is it. I'm going to die, but I will not. I refuse even to fail my mission, my purpose. I will succeed over my dead body. And that's why it's a legend. It's amazing. Because that potentially what is argued the most important battle was won even after he died. Broski got a kill from the grave. Like kill assists from the grave. I propose to you the rest of the details that links this Pokemon to El Cantar de Mi Cid. Let's look at its dex entries. The fiery blades on its arms burn fiercely with the lingering resentment of a sword wielder who fell before accomplishing their goal. And an old set of armor steeped in grudges caused this Pokemon's evolution. Ceruledge cuts its enemies to pieces without mercy. We can also look at its signature move, Bitter Blade. The user focuses its bitter feelings towards the world of the living into a slashing attack. Ceruledge is a wandering spirit. A wraith, if you would. A wraith is a type of ghost or spirit. Wraiths were traditionally said to be the embodiment of souls who are either on the verge of death or who have recently passed on. In modern times, the concept of a wraith is more likely to refer to an evil spirit, particularly one which has unfinished business in the mortal realm. And now, it waits for it to be released, for its mission complete, and its honor restored.
Bramblin, this town ain't big enough for the two of us. A Bramblin then blows between the two cowboys. Now, Bramblin are created when wandering souls unable to move on get tangled and fused to dried grass. How is that possible? Like, it's just, I guess souls are tangible to plants now. Either way, its form or main form of locomotion being simply wind, which causes it to get blown around uncontrollably to destinations unknown. It despises getting wet despite being a grass-type Pokemon, so it attempts to make its habitat in dry, rocky regions such as deserts. Its stalks are the remnants of roots on the underside of its body. It seems to have some sort of like devil horns, and its cry is very reminiscent of the whistling sound at the beginning of the good, the bad, and the ugly. It drifts very similarly to the drifter character archetype, which, many Western movies would have had, and a lot of those Western movies were filmed in Spain. It also may be strongly based on the Alicornio, a demon from the Mercian folklore that hides himself on a tumbleweed and appears on days of strong winds to snatch the souls of the passerby. Evolving into Brambleghast after walking however many steps and then leveling it up. Dear God, I went insane trying to do that. It
has like lips of sorts, giving it basically some sort of like facial ability, so it can actually have expressions now. Each eye is surrounded by what appears to be like smaller tumbleweeds made of 3 stalks, and the eyes don't blink. Instead, they flip and rotate to express Brambleghast's emotions. It catches prey using its branches, completely enveloping them, and once it does so, it will hold on until all of its life energy has been drained. On the rare occasion of an outbreak, the Dust Bowl of Brambleghast will bury entire towns. And while I feel like it's not official, I feel like the term Dust Bowl is a great name for a group of Brambleghast personally. So, I mean, it'd be cool if we made that an actual thing. I would love more group names for Pokemon to be official. Outside of that, though, this is very explicitly a ghost in terms of it being a ghost or not a ghost, while also being a ghost-type Pokemon. I feel like I'm a broken record at this point when I say that. Nevertheless, I like it. I think it's a cool tumbleweed. The second I saw it, I was like, it's a tumbleweed, and I got excited. I thought it was cool because at first I was like, oh, that's actually no. Now that I think about it, the first time I did see it, I did not think it was a Pokemon. I simply saw tumbleweed going by. I'm like, oh, that's cool. They added that to the wastelands. That's snazzy. And then I got into contact with it, and I was shocked. And then I had that reaction. So, very cool mon. Kind of scary looking, and I think that adds to the creep factor that we need in ghosts. Greavard. A Pokemon with serrated lips with enough jaw strength to just shatter bones. It usually rests underground with the candle-like part of its head left uncovered as it waits for people to come by. If it is approached, it jumps out of the ground and lets a spooky cry that may unintentionally startle most people. Greavard is friendly, affectionate, and easily gets lonely. It is really easy to befriend and will forever follow anyone who gives it the slightest attention. However, it is advised not to play with Greavard too often, as it is known to slowly and unwittingly drain the life force of those near it. That's painful. It is basically meant to be lonely. It is rumored, though, that Greavard is the reincarnation of a dog Pokemon that had never interacted with a human and died in the wild. Greavard primarily lives in the Boreal Mountains. It seems to draw inspiration from the Iberian Catalan sheepdog, but has other inspirations from Briard or Comandor as well, and the candle itself being a grave candle. It could also be based on dogs from Spanish myth and folklore, such as the Pesanta or the Dip. Basically, these dogs are rather spirits from Catalan mythology known for draining human vitality. The long white fur and grave candle may also point to the Santa Compañía as a possible origin, as those individuals are wearing white hooded cloaks and carrying candles, kind of reminiscent of the style of our Pokemon here. Then we get into its evolution, Houndstone. The candle fully forms into an actual full tombstone, which it prefers not to be touched. It still spends plenty of time burrowed underground, but now it takes residence in graveyards with only the tombstone visible. Or it at least says a tombstone-like object visible. It is considered the most loyal of all dog Pokemon, and actually weighs less than Greavard. It evolved only after being lovingly mourned. It's very sad. This is very clearly a ghost brought back. And I mean, the idea that they're often found in Boreal Mountains in this cold environment where they bury themselves in the cold makes it sadder. I just imagine those big dogs from cartoons that have like the cans or whatever to revitalize people, and they just one day couldn't make it back and they passed in the snow. Maybe that's a big part of why they are there. Maybe they helped people a lot before they passed. It's unknown. There's a lot of rumors about it in the Pokemon world itself, but ultimately, I do like this Pokemon. Another one where if it was earlier in the game and I didn't have other Pokemon that I really loved on my team, I would have put it on my team in an instant, in a heartbeat. And It's really cute when it dances on the stereo speakers when you're up against Rhyme. I love it.
Annihilate. Blood pumping harder. Rage becoming stronger. The rage provides energy that Primeape uses as it continues to fight and grow angrier. And while its brain may be protected, nothing is said about its heart as Primeape finally passes. And it looks peaceful in doing so. Finally, for the first time in its life. Almost as if some angry, malevolent spirit left its body. And it did. Now taking the shape of Annihilate. Its physical form unable to contain the rage of the soul, gaining increased power as it is no longer shackled by the mortal coil. The rage that was bubbling inside fills its punches with a force that frightens its targets to their core. Its Japanese name, Kono Yozaru, may be a combination of Kono Yo Osaru, to leave this world, to die, and Saru, monkey. It has inspiration from Gibraltar barbarian macaques, in addition to potentially being from snub-nosed monkeys, Japanese macaques, southern pig-tailed macaques, and baboons. I said a certain word enough times, hopefully YouTube's okay, it's a monkey, I swear. Sharing with the latter, the pig-like nose, proportions, and propensity for rage, the baboons. In addition to Onryo, which could be where the ghost part of this comes from, being vengeful spirits from Japanese folklore. I heard a snap behind me. I'm going insane. I'm actually scared. I'm talking about ghosts, and I'm actually getting scared. I'm gonna restart that. I looked around a bit. This is not a joke. I'm actually getting nervous, okay? So again, it may have inspiration from the Onryo, which are vengeful spirits from Japanese folklore. It may take additional inspiration from the Basajan, a hairy, ape-like being from Basque folklore. I am terrified, and if I die making this video, for the love of everything, again, somebody edit it and put it up. I don't know what's happening here, okay? This is how I lose my mind. Every time I lose my mind during a video, and apparently I'm losing my mind in a video towards the end when it's about ghosts, and I might be being haunted for real. And I think it's really freaking cool, and I'm happy it was, like, very, very, like, it was expanded upon based on, you know, previous descriptions and Pokédex entries and all that cool stuff that makes it really snazzy, open-ended for them to work with and, you know, create this actual vengeful, angry, horrifying little spirit. I would be terrified to see an Annihilate in the middle of, like, a freaking prison. I'd be done. I'd be done, and I'd want to be gone. Flutter Mane. A paradox. How did Flutter Mane get here? That makes no sense. Whatever. A paradox Pokemon that looks like Misdreavus, but is very unrelated biologically, because it's confirmed to be from a different timeline, thus meaning a different universe, since we know we have multiple universes in Pokemon. It states that it has features similar to a ghostly pterosaur, and otherwise it follows the same inspirations as Misdreavus. It's a ghost. It is an actual ghost. That Flutter Mane is also incredibly cool, and I think it was an absolute terror in terms of competitive for a while. I'm not a competitive individual in terms of the Pokemon world, so don't take my word for it. Take someone else's. Very short section. Flutter Mane's just cool. I think it's just better Misdreavus. Gimmighoul. With chest and roaming form, named by Jacques and Professor Willow, this Pokemon aims to gather 1,000 coins. The chest form Gimmighoul was born inside a chest 1,500 years ago, first discovered by Jacques in the modern day. The heavy weight of this chest does make it incredibly hard for it to move. As such, they are typically encountered in ancient Paldean structures, where it constantly and commonly gets mistaken for antiques, and either gets left behind or taken away. If chest form recognizes an approaching person or Pokemon, it uses ghost energy to control its target and force them to collect coins for its chest. Its control is noted to be incredibly strong and persistent, as One Oat's Tale tells of a Gimmighoul who manipulated a young girl to gather 999 coins to fill its chest. It is also known to drain the life out of anyone who attempts to steal its coins. The roaming form carries an ancient coin on its back, held in place by its tail. It was born from passion that seeped into the coin, and Professor Willow was the first to discover it in the modern day. It can be spotted hiding in places all over Paldea, and it is extremely timid, running away and dropping its coin as soon as anyone approaches, which makes sense. Every single time you press your button to take a coin, it's like, huh, and then gone.
It does not manipulate people and Pokemon to give it coins like its chest form counterpart. Instead, it is just able to gather coins by itself. Despite being found in Paldea, no one has ever been able to capture this form of Gimmighoul. It constantly wanders, believed to be searching for the chest it used to live in. For sustenance, it drains the life force of humans that try to steal its coin. So, yeah, I don't know how much of your life force was taken after collecting over 1,000 coins. It can be lured over through the use of a coin bag and golden lure modules. I just imagine you going, come here, little buddy, come here, here's coins for you, grab. And now, the inspirations, which, once again, I'll make it really easy with the direct quotes because it's kind of said very nicely, in my opinion. Gimmighoul may be based on the ghoul, a mythical creature from Arabic folklore, known for luring people into deserted places before preying on them and stealing coins. The word ghoul stems from the Arabic word gala, meaning to seize. Gimmighoul's antennae and tail resemble dowsing rods, which are believed to be able to help people locate buried treasures. The association of a ghost with coins, as well as its eyes resembling coins, may also draw inspiration from Charon's obol, where the deceased are buried with coins as a preparation for the afterlife. The coins were frequently placed in the mouth or on the eyes. Gimmighoul's chest form may be based on the Mimic, a monster archetype commonly found in RPGs, known for disguising itself as treasure chests. Its roaming form may be based on the Catalan folklore or folk tale of Patufe, a tiny child who carries a coin. It may also be based on Toyol, also known as Tuyul, an infant-like spirit from Indonesian and Malay folklore invoked to steal riches from people. Gimmighoul's association with the number 999 may be referenced to 999 fine gold, equivalent to 24 karat gold. More sounds. I'm losing my mind. I'm actually going crazy. I've already searched this freaking building. I don't know what else there is. I say building. This is my home. I have 2 dogs that should know if there's something here. As for its evolution, Gholdengo, our Cinema Tube Surfer Statue Award Coin Wrapper Pokemon number 1000, made up of 1000 coins. Rapid fired those at you. Gholdengo is capable of creating a golden surfboard out of coins as a means of movement. Gholdengo is a sociable Pokemon able to quickly befriend anybody. It overwhelms opponents by firing coins at them in quick succession. The coins that form its body are tightly packed, making it able to withstand damage. When attacked by enemies, it can let loose some of the coins on the areas of its body that are hit in order to absorb the impact. Gholdengo may also be based on El Dorado, a legend described by Spanish conquistadors about a lost city of gold. Originally a king whose body was covered in gold. The legend is believed to have stemmed from a ceremony done by Muisca people, oh my goodness, in modern-day Colombia, in which their ruler was initiated by having him covered in gold dust and floated into a lake on a raft. The ruler would then plunge into the lake to wash the gold off as a ritual offering. This raft may be why Gholdengo has a surfboard-like platform. By extension, its elongated body proportions and hollow eyes may be inspired by the style of Tunjos, Muisca gold figurines that were commonly used to decorate burial places and shrines. The 2 of these Pokemon, while being ghost types, are not ghosts. They're born from emotion. So, I mean, I guess, would you consider a Topa a ghost? Topas are basically, really generically putting it, imaginary friends where you believe them enough that they actually become real and tangible. Would you consider those ghosts? If you consider those ghosts, then I guess you would consider this Pokemon in general a ghost, in my personal opinion. Though, going into my opinions actually about this Pokemon, I love Gimmighoul. I think a Mimic Pokemon was something I was waiting for years. I love the idea behind it, and I thought it was incredibly cool and then it evolves into Gholdengo. And I like separately, without thinking about how much I really, really wanted a terrifying monster mimic creature that has a hoard of gold that it keeps to itself and fights anybody else who comes near, ready to pluck the soul from their body, almost just this abomination like you'd see in Dark Souls. I still like Gholdengo, despite that. I'm not upset. It makes sense, and it is very cool to see it come together the way that it did, but man, I really wanted a terrifying mimic monster Pokemon. There's a lot of potential there, and I'm not going to say they dropped the ball, because really they went above and beyond in a different direction that was unexpected, creating this actually incredible Pokemon that represents some very, like buried information, or at least information that I would have never guessed on this surface. So, I still like Gholdengo quite a bit. I think it's a cool, little bit goofy Pokemon that, for 1,000 Pokemon, it is nice actually to see something that's very happy and friendly, as it's a milestone. Poltchageist. Poltchageist is a Pokemon made of matcha tea powder that inhabits a tea caddy, specifically a kaire, a kind used in the traditional Japanese tea ceremony. Poltchageist is always seen carrying a chashaku, a tea scoop used to transfer tea powder into the tea bowl in the aforementioned tea ceremony. Unlike Sinistea, stirring its swirl pattern does not make it weaker, and according to an old tale, Poltchageist was born from the regrets of an old tea master who was so obsessed with perfecting the art of the tea ceremony that he drove away everyone around him. It is more active at night, prowling around towns and their outskirts, preferring cool, dark places, especially old houses. Poltchageist tends to scatter its matcha powder on people and food. If someone touches it or ingests the powder, they will notice their skin apparently glowing for just a brief moment. And that is at least before they just hit the ground falling unconscious, as their life force is sapped away by the powder for Poltchageist to use as its energy. It can do this to many people at once, and it has a strong tendency to use its matcha powder to repair broken objects, and it also has a counterfeit and artisan form itself. Here we have inspirations from Tsukumogami again, alongside the 3 dots above Poltchageist's left eye, resembling the Japanese map symbol for tea plantations. It's an example of convergence evolution, considering that it is very similar to Sinistea, them having external factors and pressures that made them the way that they are, to look similar and act relatively similarly. And the way that it repairs broken objects is like the artistic practice of kintsugi, and it may have some relation to the Sandman, concerning it puts you to sleep with powder. Its Japanese name, Cha-Death, may be a combination of matcha, death, and pot death, which kind of leans more into Polteageist, and as well as a pun on cha-desu, or cha-des, which it's tea. To follow, we have its evolution, Sinistcha, now inhabiting a chawan, a tea bowl used in the traditional Japanese tea ceremony. Atop its head, Sinistcha wears a chasen, a bamboo whisk used to prepare and stir matcha tea, which is a little broken and missing a few of its teeth. Sinistcha lives in cool, dark areas such as the back of a shelf or beneath a house's floorboards, and in the past, Sinistcha would sneak into houses and pretend to be tea in order to trick people into drinking it, so it can absorb their life force. However, because the chawan Sinistcha inhabits had fallen out of use, this act just kind of becomes largely unsuccessful. In recent times, instead of sneaking into houses, Sinistcha roams around towns and suburbs in search of prey. It is generally active after sunset and will attack anything that approaches with a life force draining splash of tea. In order to prepare itself for battle, Sinistcha builds up its energy by using the cha set on its head to stir itself. I guess, personally, in terms of how this all works, I'm going to give it the same treatment as Sinistea, where it's, in my opinion, not really a ghost. And as far as personal opinions go and how I feel about it, it's alright. I think the design is great. I think the background is fantastic. I don't have any personal connection to it. I think it's an absolute hit, honestly. I think they did a phenomenal job, and it feels like it has a lot of character going on for it. And there's nothing else for me to say there. So instead, how about we move on to the last Ghost-type Pokemon for now, until we get future game releases, of course. Pecharunt. Hopefully I don't die from something. That's not foreshadowing. That's just... hopefully something doesn't actually kill me when I hit stop recording. This mochi-like peach pit of a poisonous Pokemon is shelled for its own safety. Its true body hiding inside until it's ready to act, allowing chains to extend, allowing it to fight back. It is said to smell incredibly sweet and is known to feign weakness by weeping, acting like a baby for sympathy. If mortally wounded, Pecharunt will retreat into its shell and remain asleep for years so it can regain its strength. After being knocked out in Kitakami, it started being known as the never-rotting peach due to its peach-like shell. Pecharunt stores poison in its peach-shaped shell and uses it to create toxic chains and roll up poisonous binding mochi, which are stored in its shell until they are needed. It is able to use its toxic chains in combat, badly poisoning its enemies in the process, and these chains are also capable of empowering other Pokemon, using its toxins to enhance certain aspects of their bodies, such as their muscles, their brains, or their looks, which we see in Okidogi, Munkidori, and Pheasantipity. I don't know why I threw an accent on that by accident. Respectively in that order, by the way, for muscles, brains, and looks. It serves its mochi that it creates to Pokemon and humans, but may also shoot them at their mouths if necessary. The mochi themselves are basically weaponized, as they are sweet and attractive to the, the palate and to the eye, but it actually ends up controlling the human mind, forcing them to chicken dance and repeat the word mochi, which is silly and stupid, and I appreciate it. Though some people have a strong enough will to resist that we've seen in the DLC. It relies on others to defend it due to its cowardly personality and size, but will fight back if cornered alone. Those freed from its control have no memory of what happened while being controlled. According to myth, Pecharunt came from a distant land where it was adopted by an elderly couple with no children. Pecharunt fed its adoptive parents binding mochi to secure their affection, which brought out their inner greed. They made many requests of Pecharunt, who gave them what they requested to be showered with further attention. So he gives and he gets more attention back, or it gets attention back. The couple eventually asked for a brilliant set of masks, which could only be found in Kitakami. Pecharunt left to obtain the masks, recruiting Okidogi, Munkidori, and Pheasantipity to aid in its quest. They successfully stole 3 masks from Ogerpon, who defeated and slayed the Loyal 3 in retaliation. Pecharunt only survived by going dormant within its shell. It would not resurface or be found again until hundreds of years later, when a mythical Pecha berry awoke it. It, along with the trio it created, fit perfectly alongside Ogerpon as part of the Japanese folktale of Momotaro, a boy born from inside a peach, who traveled alongside a talking dog, a monkey, and a pheasant to fight a band of Oni. Oddly enough, Pecharunt is representative of Momotaro because it's inside of the peach pit, and I mean, its mentality is actually very different from Momotaro itself, and of course, it is different overall. In this case, the Oni is Ogerpon being a good protagonist, theoretically speaking, and Pecharunt is the antagonist, controlling others against their will. So it's a role reversal, pretty much. Now, its ghost type could reference the Shintoist myth of the creator deity Izanagi no Mikoto's descent to Yomi, the Shintoist underworld, in which Izanagi threw 3 peaches to drive off its pursuers and escape the land of the dead, later declaring the peach a divine fruit. Given its moniker of never-rotting peach, Pecharunt could also be based on the peaches of immortality in Chinese mythology, which confer great longevity to their consumers. Its habit of acting like a baby to gain the sympathy of people is similar to the behavior of certain yokai, like the Konaki Jiji. Pecharunt may also draw inspiration from the Hinagami, a doll-shaped yokai that will grant its owner's wishes, but will always demand more and more in requests, and that
will possess their owner until their death. Pecharunt's myth shows how its adoptive family can become greedier over time, and the loyal three are all said to have had a wish granted by Pecharunt. Hinagami are built using soil from a graveyard, which also could contribute to Pecharunt's ghost type. Overall, Pecharunt has so much going into it, so much information, so much detail, so much just lore and story and myth that really builds into what it is. And I think, honestly, the Ogerpon Pecharunt story, DLC, that whole thing with how it all played out is one of my favorite moments in all of Pokemon. I was happy. I loved it. Ogerpon was a hit. People loved Ogerpon to my knowledge, and it's absolutely one of my favorites. I know I shouldn't be talking about Ogerpon when Pecharunt is here, and I think because of Pecharunt, it just elevated Ogerpon further, which is honestly hilarious considering the dynamic between the two. Pecharunt is ultimately a very... It's hard to say it's evil, right? Do you consider something evil if it does only what it knows, if it does what it has only been taught, and it isn't really taught? It is defensive, it's instinctual, it is acting on a whim, on a want for attention and love. It is very similar to Mimikyu, except it went a different direction, and it's desperate for that love. So, I enjoy Pecharunt. I actually could see myself developing more appreciation for Pecharunt as I continue looking at more and more Pokemon, and one day read all of these bits of stories and information that built Pecharunt to be what it is for future videos. Also, Pecharunt, not an actual ghost. Yeah, it's like some weird immortal weird thing. I don't know how to explain it otherwise, but I would dare say it's not an actual ghost. It's a peach pit. You know, they just didn't want to make it a grass poison type because we kind of have that. It makes more sense for it to be a poisonous peach pit. So it's more of like, I don't know, this thing that has spiritual power to control your spirit and mind. So, you know, say what you will. Otherwise, though, there you have it. Every single ghost type Pokemon explained, at least for now. So, if you want to support research like this, videos like this, and so much more, as I am going to be working on so many more videos for this month, for this wonderful spooky month of Halloween. Between all the videos that I have for this month, let alone the next couple of months, I'm very excited, as yes, I eventually will be working on the complete ecosystem of Johto. But I have a couple of videos I want to do in between now and then to really get some breathing room and really celebrate our spooky month here. Maybe even talk about what might be truly the most evil Pokemon of all time. That sounds really fun to me, alongside, you know, reviewing Giratina the Sky Warrior and a couple of other things, playing some spooky games on stream. So join along, come on in, and if you wanted to give an extra bit to support, become a member for $3. These guys did, as I pointed the wrong way initially. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do, don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!